Hello, everybody. My Milo note just decided to refresh itself, and I don't know why.
Good timing.
Great timing. I mean, it better fix itself before we get to it, because I don't want to use my phone Milo note for this. I'll do it, but I won't be happy about it. I also you can ask Matt 5 minutes ago, I prepped the We're Live post. I forgot to post them just now. So, did that. How is everybody? How is everybody's weekend? We're all filtering in. For those who don't know, I normally wait a couple minutes because YouTube loading's weird. Some people got to refresh. Some people don't get the notification right away. So how is your Tuesday weekend? As we wait for chat.
I am on week 2 of working 6 days a week instead of 5. So I'm just kind of a corpse that it has come just barely to life.
Why so?
Ever so slightly reanimated.
Is it just like because it's back to school season, or?
We had a coworker that was out for a couple weeks, and we're a very small group. So when someone's out, not a lot of backup.
Right. If the children yelling bothers anybody, let me know. I'm back in the living room for the moment because life, and I have to. My garage den and I, we will be reunited.
There will be a reunion.
Yes, but it's not here right now. So, how was your weekend, Sophie? If you wish to talk about it.
My weekend has been kind of chaotic. I'm moving on Wednesday. I'm going off to college, so there's a lot of things to be gotten and packed and organized and stuff. Yeah, so I worked Saturday and Sunday, and I've also been feeling kind of bad, so just juggling, health and also trying to get the moving thing done. I went and bought a bunch of sheets and stuff, all the very, very fun things associated with moving out. It actually was fun for me.
I enjoy packing and everything as well.
Packing is great, honestly.
I hate packing. Can you guys pack for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I actually, so I showed somebody new All That Glitters yesterday because we were just chatting, and I was like, well, have you ever actually read my writing? And they're like, no, and I didn't get a chance to beta. And I was like, here's my document. Y'all know me. I just throw things at people. And then there's a line in there about how Eric is efficient at packing, and they highlighted it and they were like, why is this the most Sam line to ever Sam? And I'm like, how did nobody ever notice that before? Not even me. It's true though. So I'll pack for you.
Thank you. You can count on my Virgo buddies.
Yep. You need someone to pack, call some Virgos.
That's us.
My dad's a Virgo, but
it's okay. It's
the
okay.
Side eye.
Everybody, every sign has their.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say hello to chat because I was doing some other things. So hi, chat.
Hi, chat.
I say I, like Matt and Sophie will ignore you all, but they won't. I promise.
Ew, chat. I don't want to talk to them. Get out of here.
So how is chat doing? If you haven't answered, yes, please say. Don't get rid of my view.
Don't listen to me.
It took me a moment. Hello. Having a heck of a time trying to make a book trailer with After Effects, but book trailer. I had to resist my knee jerk to be like about Candy's book, but I also don't remember what Candy's book is about at the moment. Missed opportunity. So excited for this. I usually write urban supernatural dramas, but I've started a fantasy series. Well, I've got some fun information for you about fantasy and supernatural.
Be
Like
sure
the-
to subscribe so you
Yeah.
can stay up to date with all of it and get notifications.
Yes. We will do our intros in a
Gotcha.
moment, I promise. Hello, hello, hi. I'm seeing a bunch of new faces
Me
in here.
too. I was just about to say that, but I wasn't sure if it's just because I haven't been around in a little while.
Oh,
Or if
no.
these are actually new people.
They are new people.
Well, welcome. I hope you have fun. I hope we don't disappoint you or scare you away.
I really hate unpacking because it seems like you have more stuff.
Isn't that a good
I
thing?
enjoy the whole process. I like organizing, decluttering, packing, unpacking, arranging, more organizing. I finally opened the spice rack that somebody had given us, only to discover it was missing half the pieces. So I only have one rack instead of two, but it's okay because the spices that fit, they look gorgeous.
Congratulations.
Love it.
Thank you. Then you thought, that's awesome. Time to get the notebook. Let me tell you, Matt and Sophie, I linked them to my Mila note earlier. That's just the beginning of my notes. I haven't even actually gone into all of the genres yet. Hello, hello. All right, we have been in here long enough, so go ahead, my dear co-host, and introduce thyselves while I...
Not me taking like a huge deep breath before introducing myself. I'm Matt. I'm a fantasy writer working on my debut fantasy novel. That's why I'm here. I also have a short story that is fantasy. Might be in a collection here soon. If it's not, it'll be somewhere. I'll find a way for you to get it.
We'll know by the end of September.
Yes, it's coming up. And then also I've got some social medias hanging out down there in the old link tree. Check those out and stay up to date with everything I'm up to, which is not much. It's work. It's always work.
I feel that in my soul.
I'm Sophie Lina B. I'm a writer and an illustrator. I'm currently working on my debut novel, which is a young adult fantasy romance, which is also going to be illustrated, called The Rebel Bard. It's in like the third or fourth draft now. I'm honestly not sure. Deep into the editing stages, but I posted about that and artwork of... I do maps, which I post on my Instagram, and artwork of my characters and artwork of other things. So if you like art and you like writing, follow me on Instagram to see what I'm doing. Yeah, that's really my only important social media. So
Sophie's maps are badass.
That map making TikTok you made is one of the most satisfying things I've ever seen in my life.
I'm so glad you like it, and I'm also sorry because I actually already finished that map and I forgot I was supposed to make a part 2. So
just show me the finished result and I will forgive
but
you.
I did like the next step, and then I was like, oh shit, I was supposed to record that. I'm really good at making content. So, but if you want to see the finished map, follow me on Instagram. It's pretty cool. So
yes. I was checking my DMs real quick, and Fox is like, have you warned anyone that this is an 8-hour conversational essay on fantasy yet? Are they naive and feeling safe? Probably, for the moment.
For now.
Little do they know. So much. Little do you know, you just came to class.
And hello, sorry, I got distracted because I just realized I never changed my name from a different stream. I'll change that in a moment. But I am Writing Mom Samantha L. Nasset, and this is my channel where I talk about writer things, parent things, and writer parent things. When I post videos, they are on Thursdays. Right now, it's very inconsistent and unreliable because I have a chronic illness, which is kicking my productive ass, and we're not friends. But, you know, I can't kick them out either. I've been trying. But when I do post, I post them on Thursday. Mondays, however, I host these live streams because it is one of the few joys that I get to have in life right now. And sometimes we have talks like this, where we have a topical thing and we discuss them, and everybody calls me out for my essay and analytical habits, but you know what? It's okay. Everybody has a good time anyway. And other times we host productivity writing sprints where, we socialize and try to get work done in between. If you would like to keep up to date with all things Sam, I do have a newsletter which you can find via my website, Samantha L. Nasset, down below. If you would like to see a sample of my writing so you know that I know what I'm talking about, I have Until Pizza Do Us Part on my website, and I have 2 more short stories, one that will definitely be going on the website either this year or next year, and the other one might be published in the same possible compendium that Matt was talking about, or it will be going up on the website this year because I am biased and Fox is going to yell at me for that because he likes the other one more. But it is what it is. And yeah, I think... I have a Ko-fi.
Give Sam money.
If you would like to help support the channel, I have a van that I have to pay off now. So yeah, I think I got everything now.
I forgot to mention.
Yes, go ahead, Sophie.
Everything. I forgot to mention I also have a short story that might also be in the same thing, but I know where you said we're going to get into whether like supernatural fiction counts as fantasy.
Yes.
So I honestly don't know.
So we're all.
It's like a historical supernatural.
Look, I have a whole section dedicated to genres that are era specific.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's at least 4 or 5 of them, maybe 6.
Okay.
Definitely 5.
All right, cool.
My favorite section is ye old ass shit. It's my favorite. I don't know why I paused weirdly between old and ass right there.
Different than the new regular ass shit.
Yes, ye old ass shit. All right, we got to catch back up to chat. I may have been very last minute adding Matt's talking points to the Milo note because I realized I couldn't copy paste them. Somebody sent me a screenshot.
Sorry.
Where even were we? There's the notebook comment. I'm just going to say hello again to people in case, because I like to try to say hello to everybody. I just found out the book I'm writing's mainly fantasy, but I definitely need an explanation so I can make sure. I will try to help you. Now, we have this live stream. I wanted to have the video done before this live stream, actually, but as I said, things keep coming up, and migraines are not research and note-taking friendly, it turns out, in case anybody was wondering about that. So there's progress, though. There's definitely progress, and I'm enjoying the research. So I will have my next genre umbrella video is fantasy, and I will talk about every genre I find because I'm insane. It's fine.
Someone's got to do it. Thank you, Sam, for being the one.
Now, I need to know if this is like rose like the flower or rosé like the wine. Because I know rosé would have the accent, but...
It's rose the flower.
A short summary.
You know, why not?
Okay.
All right, so the short summary of Candy's book for the trailer she's making is the champion meant to save everyone is out of commission. Time for the backup champion. I'm intrigued. And then we've got talks of ice cream because even the new people talk about food on my channel. Although I think
always
Audra
food.
Started it. Always food. Sherry called me out for that when I was on Jessica's channel, or she was like, "Why every time we stream, there's always food?" And I'm like, "It is how I cannot every time." Fantasy food. I'm adding that to the talking points. Hold on.
That's a good one.
We're giving it to Sophie. There we go. Fantasy food.
Because I didn't come up with any, so
I wasn't gonna call you out like that.
I called me out. It's okay.
It's fine. In your defense, I forgot if Matt messaged me this morning, and he's like, "So you need talking points for me?" Because like this isn't his first Let's Talk rodeo, and I was like, "Yes, those would be great."
I was like, "Oh yeah, those guys."
I should mention that to Sophie. I feel the chronic illness. It's like a roommate that doesn't pay. That's right. That's rude motherfucker.
And they also like harass you all the time.
They do. And all forms of self-care you attempt, like some days they work magnificently, and then other days they just make everything worse. And you're like, why?
Why are you doing this?
Why would you do this to me? Possible anthologies are exciting. Yes, it's it was a contest hosted by Sasha Black. I'm not sure if I should talk about it in the past or present tense because the contest is technically over, but due to her book launch at the time and life issues, she said she wouldn't be able to go through the entries until September. So we will know by the end of September. But we're all just excited for the world to read the short stories, so we just keep going. Yeah, we have them. They're here.
They're there. We wrote something. Writers.
They're so good, and I'm also proud of mine. So you should read all 3 of the short stories in this chat because they're all fantastic.
I love them all. Actually, Sophie, yours might fit into weird fiction.
Ooh!
I think about it, so.
I don't know what that is, but...
You're going to find out that she's just insulting you.
Look, weird fiction is possibly one of my favorite genres that I hate absolutely everybody who talks about it.
Okay.
Because the genre itself is very interesting to me, but everybody who, like, when I try to research it and read it, they are, like, some of the most pretentious.
Anyway, on the little that I know about this, we'll get into it, but it seems like something that I might write a lot, but we'll see.
Yes, that will be
our first. About
it. That will be the first thing.
Okay, cool.
All the fantasy knowledge. Yes. Hello. Rose like the flower.
Rose like the flower.
It's a good flavor. Deep fantasy discussion ahead. Hey, yeah. In my hometown, there's an ice cream shop with candied mushroom cat flavored ice cream. It tastes like butter pecan. That's fascinating.
I would just have butter pecan ice cream.
What's weird fiction? Okay. Mushroom ice cream.
It does sound like a fantasy fruit.
Yeah, like you eat some little forest ice cream.
Like you eat it and you either die or you meet God.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we do anything, because I'm gonna forget again, let me change my name because I am
okay, so I thought that was on purpose. I thought it was like a play on fantasy. And I was like, we both did a play on fantasy.
There's
actually I need a fantasy name.
There's actually a genre in French speaking countries that's called fantastique, which is considered separate. And I'm like, I was being a smartass on a different stream.
No.
I changed my name to the Fantastique Sam. But yes. All right. So first of all, we're going to go over what fantasy is, because there's a lot of confusion as to the actual definition of fantasy. And let me just, because I don't want to, let me just go to my notes here, because I hate when I start to trip over my words when I'm trying to remember a thing. Where is my scroll sideways bar? Damn you. All right. So, so fantasy is a genre under speculative fiction, so first you have speculative fiction, which is a broad category of fiction encompassing genres with elements that are non-existent in the terms of reality, recorded history, or nature, and the present universe, covering various themes in the context of supernatural, futuristic, and other imaginative topics. Basically, if it ain't possible in reality, it's in spec fic. Mm-hmm. Which a lot of people, myself included when I was younger, get speculative fiction and sci-fi mixed up. Like they think sci-fi is the thing and spec fiction is under it, but actually sci-fi is under speculative fiction. And then fantasy is distinguished from the genres of sci-fi and horror. These are the like big 3 in spec fic, by the respective absence of scientific or macabre themes, though the genres themselves do overlap, and there are some subgenres of fantasy that mix and match with sci-fi and horror. So yes, so a lot of people think that in order to classify as fantasy, you have to take place in a different world. No, it's not actually a have to. Magic. You don't actually have to have any magic in fantasy. There's a lot of good fantasy books that don't have a speck of magic. And there was something else, but I don't remember what it was. So yeah, so that's basically fantasy as the like broadest definition in a nutshell. Do we have anybody who has comments so far? Questions?
When I first started writing my novel and I hadn't really done a lot of research about writing. I was not sure if my novel was a fantasy novel, even though it takes place in like a totally made up place because there's no magic. And I talked to a lot of people who really genuinely thought that like if there's no magic, it's not fantasy. And also that if you want to write like a fantasy with no magic, you should just be writing historical fiction, which is like one of the worst takes. Anyways,
I
but
remember
yeah, I'm
that
thankful.
comment. That I saw that discussion in the writing group. That was actually the whole reason. I was like, I wrote a script about the genre umbrella, and I was like, I'm making this video. I'm sick and tired of gatekeeper elitist bullshit. I just threw
I was pretty new. Like I wasn't new to writing, but I was new to like researching how to classify my writing at that point. So having people tell me that kind of bullshit that just like is totally untrue was like so bad for someone who's really just trying to figure out what's going on. Thankfully, I had people like Sam to help me figure out what's going on.
I will fight all of the elitists.
I made the world. It's fantasy. It's a fantasy.
But there's no magic.
I know.
It should be just like in 14th century Europe, though.
Okay, so you could put werewolves into a fantasy setting and they would be perfectly fine. Werewolves are like by themselves are traditionally considered in the either supernatural or paranormal, which are kind of interchangeable words for the same genre of horror, because like horror deals with those kind of monsters and supernatural like ghosty things that like horror decides here are the monsters of our world, and a lot of horror is all about, well, is it the monster or is it man? And like which one's the greater threat, or the monsters are like representative of greater threats or other things, or sometimes you just have a monster that people gotta run the fuck away from. But either way, you can put werewolves into a fantasy setting, though. There's like absolutely no reason not to. But that's just one of those things where it's like horror has always, from the beginning, had fantasy elements in it. So.
Yeah.
So this is first time. Well, I can also just DM them to you. I just nobody has ever really asked for them except like my friends and stuff, and they get shoved the links anyway just because I'm over eager and an oversharer, and I'll be all like, hey. But yeah, no, it's fine. I also I attempt to do subtitling sometimes, but I can't always do that. So I just like non-existent monster/creatures in general, or just I mean, most fantasy, a lot of fantasy creatures are made up. So do I. There will be a Let's Talk Werewolves, just like there was a Let's Talk Vampires, but it's got to wait a little bit. I need time. Yeah, see, okay, so here's the other thing. When it comes to picking your genre, at the end of the day, a lot of genres could cross over, or stories could be one or the other. However, it kind of boils down to like it's not just the content, it's also the tone, the atmosphere, the story that you're telling, the themes, the kind of, it all works together. And at the end of the day, if you want to label your story one thing, then that it's your story. Nobody can really tell you that you're necessarily wrong unless it's a hard cut line. For example, like romance has to have a happy ending. Tragedy like has to have a sad or tragic ending. That's just it's the defining feature of their genres. So you could label it wrong, but readers are not going to be very pleased with you if they want to, they're like, yes, let me sit down with this very light-hearted romance novel because I would like to unwind at the end of the day. Oh my god, why is there a monster slaughtering everyone every 10 pages? That's what I thought. Like, ain't gonna be expectations. They are there.
Yeah, that's something I always love to hear is when people are always like, I want to subvert expectations. And like, yeah, you just didn't You just lied about the genre. You didn't subvert expectations. You lied.
There
That's
is
what you did.
I am just about to read Writing Monsters. It's really good. My book is a thriller with some Bigfoot encounters. Sweet.
Ooh, Bigfoot.
You're right about the story and theme. I feel like a lot of supernatural could be horror. Well, see, the thing is, supernatural is a subgenre of horror. Not all horror is scary. That's actually it's like fantasy. It's one of those things where people are like, yes, horror, scary. But there's like horror comedy is a huge genre. It's like super popular, and people just don't like connect. That's like, oh, but it's not scary, and it's like, yes, but it's still horror. So horror is more just, this isn't a horror stream. I need to stop. Yeah, you can't let me just go on tangents about my favorite genre. Well, second favorite. My favorite.
I was gonna say, isn't romance your favorite genre?
I was gonna say I have some Jeopardy boards.
Yes.
I have receipts.
Jeopardy board PTSD. No, romance is my favorite genre. I meant umbrella, though. Of the umbrellas, horror is my favorite, but romance is my favorite genre, period. But what if the slaughtering isn't... All right, look. If the couple is some twisted, psychotic, villainous couple, maybe I'll be into it. Because, so like, I love those villainous couples who are all like, I would break the world for you, but they're like a really healthy, romantic couple. I'm like, yes, burn the fucking world down. But that is not the context that I meant, and you know it. We all know it.
Horror romance is probably a thing.
I've definitely seen a K-drama that was a horror romance, which is funny because I was like, I want to write horror romance. I want to combine those. Is that a thing? Can I do that? And then I saw the horror romance and I was like, this is my new dream. I have a new genre to master. It's just y'all wait. Just you wait. I feel like Fox is going to yell at me. The horror was the favorite. No, it's romance. I misspoke. I do that.
And we will not forgive you for that.
Excuse me. So I believe steampunk is actually considered a sci-fi fantasy crossover genre. Let me look under era specific. Yes, it is. It is under gaslamp fantasy, using a Victorian or Edwardian setting. And then there's steampunk. So totally could be. See, this is what I mean. It's like, yes, this sci-fi or this fantasy thing could be either, could be both. It depends on who you ask.
Fantasy is a really broad term. So like making your fantasy more specific isn't going to make it not fantasy. It's just going to make it like a more niche kind of fantasy.
Yes, exactly. I believe it's called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. It was on Netflix. It's real good. It's a suspense one. I was very concerned how they were going to handle certain things, but then they did it so well.
Love that.
Yes. Okay, so I know that we had like things that we favored and stuff, but Sophie wanted to know about weird fiction, so tosses all the other talking points to the side. Okay, so weird fiction is an old term. It's not like the oldest form, but it's one of the old terms. It's like there was Gothic, and like Gothic was a type of fantasy, and then Poe, I believe somebody said Poe wrote weird fiction, but like the coin wasn't termed until after he was done. But it's basically when the story is like, I just wrote a whole fucking section on this one. Hold on. It's when the macabre and unsettling stories from before the terms fantasy and horror. So it predates the actual terms fantasy and horror, and it's kind of like a mix of those. It kind of reinterprets like ghosts and werewolves and vampires and other traditional like supernatural horror, and it brings a sort of different feel to it. It wants to inspire this feeling of like awe and like mystery and just like respect and an almost religious kind of Zen, but they use the word numinous, which I don't remember what that means. arousing spiritual or religious emotion, mysterious or awe-inspiring. Okay. I made a note because I'm like, I'm not going to remember what this word means. I'm just going to remember that they used it. But yeah, so Lovecraft is really well known for like weird fiction. Weird fiction is also kind of tentacles are used to differentiate it from like other Gothic and stuff, because whereas regular like horror or fantasy will use werewolves or elves or other things, they don't like really use abstract monsters that don't have some sort of basis in nature, because like, you know, werewolves, they're based on wolves,
but like
vampires,
established
they're based on lore. But then there's a word for it and I cannot remember the word, but it's not Lovecraftian. It's just but that's the only one I can think of. But yeah, so it's essentially just like I had a sentence and my brain said, you don't get that sentence anymore. Yeah, it says it combines like horror, fantasy, and sci-fi, like elements from all three of those, and featuring alien-like monsters a lot of times. And especially there's, what was the sentence? I'm sorry, you two can talk, I swear. Okay, so like Bram Stoker's Dracula was technically, some people considered that weird fiction as opposed to like supernatural at the time, because the writing had an atmosphere of like reverence. That's what I want. It's like reverence towards the monsters and everything. So it's just like it's man, and then man is little and insignificant in the big scheme of the world, with like these maligned powers or forces that humans just can't even comprehend. So that's kind of like the OG weird fiction. Weird fiction isn't used a lot today because apparently people want to use slipstream genre or new weird, which I have nothing nice to say about slipstream genre.
What does that mean? What is that?
Okay.
I don't know, thanks.
I'm going to directly quote the thing. All right, so slipstream genre falls between speculative fiction and mainstream fiction. Richard Dorset said it was invented by his late friend Richard Dorset. Oh, wait. Sorry. Bruce Sterling said it was invented by his late friend Richard Dorset, while the two were discussing a category of non-genre fantasy books that had no name for. I don't know what a non-genre fantasy book, but anyway. And he said, they're certainly not mainstream. I said, and why not slipstream? He suggested, and I thought it was a pretty good coinage.
This genre is not like other genres.
I present to you the hipster genre of weird fiction. It's
not like the other genres.
It's just defined as a story that makes the familiar strange or the strange familiar, and it's for anything that doesn't fit anywhere else, is what they said.
Okay, so just all I could find somewhere else. Don't make a whole new genre.
So it's the genre junk drawer, so to speak.
It's not the only one though, because
got a thumbtack, throw it in there.
We have new weird, which they actually, nobody can decide on a definition for new weird, and that is apparently part of the defining feature of new weird, is that there's no set rules or themes or anything. One of the definitions is pretty much just weird fiction, but made by newer authors. And then I will again read word for word the definitions. Exercises in world-building characteristics by a heterogeneity of sources, genres, and details, particularly eclectic, mixing modern street culture with ancient mythology. I read that line and I'm like, do I write new weird? But a type of, the next definition, a type of urban secondary world fiction that subverts the romanticized ideas about places found in traditional fantasy largely by choosing realistic, complex, real-world models as the jumping-off point for creation of settings that may combine elements of both sci-fi and fantasy. I don't know how that's different from contemporary fantasy. Don't mind my snarky comments. I just... there are too many subgenres, and part of that is because... yeah. Like most literary categories, is a moment, a suggestion, a tease, an intervention, an attitude, above all an argument. You cannot read off a checklist and say X is in, Y is out, and think you've understood what's at stake and what's being argued. But apparently the general consensus is that it subverts cliches of the fantastic in order to put them to discomforting rather than consoling ends. Is noted to break down the barriers between sci-fi, supernatural, and horror like weird fiction did. The only example I could find, or the only example that was listed on the thing that I was reading, is Pan's Labyrinth. I was planning on finding more examples for my video, though. But like I said, my notes are a work in progress. But yes, so there's that.
Okay.
But I really enjoy weird fiction in general because it's like, I like Edgar Allan Poe and things like that.
I feel like it opens the door for a lot of dread.
Yes.
When it's just like
atmosphere. It's so atmospheric, and I love it.
And just a sense of doom.
When I watch horror, dread and like atmosphere is literally my main qualifier. Like if it makes me feel dread and like there's just like a weight pressing down on my body, then I will watch it. So I definitely am also into that in writing.
I cannot confirm whether or not all of the authors that I quoted were. I know at least one of them was a woman, though. But yes, for the most part.
That is how it is usually.
Yeah, like New Weird was actually coined by, I cannot remember her name at the moment. But she made a compendium called The New Weird, and there was a bunch of new weird
I'm letting my college professors down because we talked about this and I don't remember her name.
There's also like there was a quote that I didn't put in my notes, but I remember it so distinctly. This person was like, I finished The New Weird just as confused as to what new weird genre was as I was when I went into it. So yeah, but that's an example of how it's like weird fiction and all of its little bitsy children are very much horror themed. It's fantasy and horror put together with some science fiction thrown in there sometimes. And Slipstream.
It's curious to me that you think that Patsy, which is my short story, could fit into that category, because I definitely was like, with the monster in that story, the main thing that I was going for was like a vibe.
Yeah, it's because so the reason I think
fiction is a vibe.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's the genre.
It's very atmospheric, and it is one of those genres that is hard to define as, because it's like, well, basically it's all of these things that would be like dark fantasy. Yeah. But also maybe dark contemporary fantasy. But the biggest defining feature is just, it's the atmosphere. It's the vibe. It's the way that the monsters are written. And in Patsy, there's this very, very much a weird fiction atmosphere, at least to me. And then that weird reverence, but also healthy fear of the monster in Patsy.
I was definitely going for like an ageless, unknowable vibe.
Fantasy is just so. Well, one of my favorite quotes that other people often quote back to me, I do not remember the video. I think it was my genre umbrella video. It's just where I'm like, the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is, how do you describe the pew pew? Is it magic or science?
That's one of my favorite Sam quotes.
It's so helpful.
Yep, it's just, how do you explain? I think you said the wishy wishy.
Yeah, it was like kind of
wishy. That's what it is.
Wishy wishy. Yep.
Wishy. Is it magic or?
Is it magic or science?
That's what I need merch of. How do you explain the wishy wishy? Thank you. gonna get it on a mug and then show it off and not tell anybody where I got it. Yeah, fantasy is that this is how I'm feeling right now phrase. I do think there's a little more to like there's definitely more to some of the genres than just the vibe. I'm just saying weird fiction is definitely
Weird fiction
very
is about a
vibe
vibe.
oriented.
It's defined by its vibe.
Yes.
Based on what I just learned about it just now. I didn't know.
So he's like, based on everything, Sam just told me. I would definitely, like, as much as I am very pro research and everything, like, okay, I don't want to say don't research weird fiction, but if you do, be prepared to pull out the dictionary and try to.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's like people who think they're in academia, but they're really just on Reddit.
Let me see if I can, because I sent like a sentence because I was in a call with CB while I was doing this, and I'm like, CB, you have to witness this sentence. Oh yeah, it's like usually roughly conceived of as a rather breathless and generically slippery, macabre fiction, a dark fantastic. And I'm like, so part of my notes is just taking sentences like that and being like suspenseful and generically slippery, macabre, which I only kept that phrase because when I was desperately looking for a better way to say it, no, that's just the thing. That's just the phrase that they use. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Every time someone on the internet busts out a thesaurus, I lose 5 years off my life.
Look, I am a human thesaurus, and I was like, what the fuck are some of these words? Hello, hello, welcome, and hi. Also, chat, if you have questions, feel free to add them. It can be about genre. It could just be like anything, as long as it's fantasy or related.
Did you like cough there?
I might have, maybe a little.
You okay?
Yeah, fine. Me with a whole ass science and English degree can come wondering. Exactly. Like, ugh. And let me tell you, the only reason I can translate some of these things as well as I do is because, like, I've been researching this shit since I was 12 or 13, so I just speak the language now. I've just obtained it.
That's like when I go ahead.
When I was like writing the list out of all the fantasy subgenres I now had to research, I got to weird fiction and I was like, yeah, weird fiction. And Chris was like, what's weird fiction? And I explained it to him. And then I was like, why do I know that? How do I know that? when did I gain that knowledge? So, things.
You're born with it.
All right.
Or maybe it's Maybelline.
Wait, no, I didn't say. I don't think I said anything remotely sounding like your name. My child was like, Mom, did you say my name? No. Okay, we will go to one of Matt's talking points, which realism. How about that one?
Yeah, that guy.
Oh, but first.
Are
you prepared? These are as tentatively categorized by Sam based on the brief knowledge that she has of some of them and the more in-depth knowledge she has as others. Please note that I also have a MISC section that is not yet organized, but it will be later. Because I looked at these things and I was like, what is that? But all right. So in ye old ass shit, we have weird pause again. In ye old ass shit, we have weird fiction, which also has slipstream and new weird. And then we have fables, fairy tales, legends, and magical realism. There's also gods and demons fiction. Then there's juvenile fantasy / children's literature. I have a specific reason for why that's its own thing. Fear not. I know what I'm doing there. And then in pretty standard, which is my next section, there's heroic fantasy, sword and sorcery, magical girl, high fantasy, low fantasy, fantastique, and hard fantasy. And then in crossover genres, we have paranormal romance, romantic fantasy, science fantasy, isekai, sword and planet, dying earth, Then there's contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy, comic fantasy, wuxia, and lit RPG. Because apparently that's listed as the fantasy genre, so it's going in here. Era specific, which is gaslamp fantasy, influenced by gothic. Okay, that's not a thing. Steampunk, and then historical fantasy. And then under gotta have edge, we've got dark fantasy and grim dark. Yes, they are two different things. And then under things, which is my uncategorized one because I want to like read more about them before I fit them into any of my places, is Bangsian fantasy, fantastic poetry, and fantasy of manners. Which on Bangsian fantasy, that is like specifically stories that feature interacting with famous historical figures in the afterlife, and I didn't know there was enough of it's one of the most specific, but it's a thing. So, yep, there's listed.
Yeah, I write llama fantasy. It's fantasy with llamas in it. That's a whole genre.
Now there is listed. That is listed. All of my current subgenres I will be covering. If I find new ones, they will be added to the list. Because, like I said, I'm devoted. That's what I'll say. We're doing well.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Gaslamp fantasy, which is close to gaslight fantasy, but very different connotations, I assume.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Matt, realism. That's what we were doing next.
Realism. Yes. So I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely hate, and I feel like this is any conversation involving fantasy ever, or just writing in general, and it also comes up in fantasy, where people are always like, that's not realistic, and I hate it a lot because they'll be talking about like the most like unimportant thing, and it's like, yo, there was a dragon a page ago. And they just hold on to like, oh, actually in medieval Europe, this isn't how that went. It's like, well, this isn't medieval Europe. And also, shut up, there was a dragon a page ago. Calm down. This is supposed to be fun and escapism, not like, I don't need to know about taxes in fantasy.
It's okay. So I maintain the believable, not realistic, because as long as it is believable within the context of your fantasy world, that is what matters. It doesn't matter if it's fantasy is literally under speculative fiction, which is the genre for things that don't exist. Like specifically, it's not realistic. If everything in the fantasy world is realistic, you're probably not writing fantasy. You're writing contemporary.
That is the only situation where you should be writing historical fiction.
If I have to be able to go in the backyard and summon a dragon and write it. But but it is important that it be believable. It's
right.
Just, so it's really interesting to me and can be very telling of the other person as to where that line is, like what their suspension of disbelief will allow. Because like you're saying, people are like, oh, well, that's not historically accurate. And it's like, oh, do tell me where the dragon existed in history. Or one of the things I like to do, because I write I primarily write low fantasy, which for everybody, that is the fantasy that takes place in not Earth. So I love when people are like, oh, but that wouldn't be historically accurate. And I'm like, oh, please do show me to the encyclopedia of the history of this world that I made up. I would love to, I'll correct it if you're right. Oh, what? You don't have the encyclopedia to the world that I made up and the history that I made up, therefore I know it better than anybody else? Oh, well, such a shame, isn't it? I guess I'm not changing anything.
I have a comment, question. Yes. Based on, we've talked a lot about high and low fantasy. I thought that high fantasy was the one that was not Earth.
Oh, you could be correct. I might have fucked up. Hold on, let me check.
Okay, because that was one thing, because people assume high fantasy is magic and low fantasy is not magic. And my novel.
Yeah, that might have just been me because of the brain fog and.
Totally, yeah. I figured that might be the case, so I wanted to correct it before people.
I have it right here if I can just find where it is. Of course, the short definition that I have on my list is not the... Yes, high fantasy is the one that's not on Earth. That's my bad. I should have remembered because of the Tolkien thing. Sorry, I write high fantasy, which doesn't take place on Earth. Sophie corrected me. I'm supposed to be the one that knows things.
It's okay. We can both know things.
But yes, low fantasy takes place in the real world. High fantasy does not. Fun fact, a lot of people try to categorize Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings as high fantasy because they try to state that, like, it's an epic quest and there's a lot of magical creatures and everything. But Tolkien himself actually resented this because he considered his novels low fantasy because he says that he wrote it about Earth, just like an alternative history, Earth. So.
Okay.
That's normally how I remember.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have to go to my shame corner.
You're saying,
It's fine.
Sam, even immortals make mistakes.
Even an immortal has to take her brain meds sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't factor in the physics of falling sand correctly. Unrealistic. No.
Sorry.
Something else that bothers me about the realism thing is I most often see it used to justify like racism in your fantasy.
Oh my god, yes.
All the time.
Yeah, I don't even think I have to say more about that. I saw this one post one time. It was like talking about like homophobic like fantasy where people are like, well, it's not historical. The homophobia is historically accurate. And then the other person was like, oh, when in history did elves hate gay people?
Like
And
it's such a bad argument when you start as like, oh, please do tell. Yes.
It's just very telling about the other person.
Yes, it is. You can tell so much by where is their line.
And it's like, if you love medieval Europe, that's cool, that's fine, but that is not like the fantasy genre is not exclusively Earth medieval Europe.
Yeah,
it's not.
It isn't.
I actually, for All That Glitters, my festival thing is more inspired by all of the anime I've ever watched and their night markets and stuff. And Sherry called that because they were like, as an Asian, I love this night market scene. And I was like, you got the right inspiration. I'm so proud of myself for being able to portray that well. But like, it's an inspiration. I just see things and I like them sometimes. And that came out wrong, but you know.
I understand. I mean, it's totally like most fantasy is like grounded or inspired by like some real world place.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thin line between appreciation and appropriation though.
Oh, yeah.
I feel that is important to state. I do a lot of research and I don't like take anything that is like sacred or off limits or stuff to the best of my ability. And if I am told that I was wrong, I generally edit it or change things. My book is a contemporary fantasy. It has lots of fights, some of them bloody, but I don't think it falls under dark fantasy. How dark does it have to be? So dark fantasy, from my current understanding, it is not one of the ones I've gotten to yet. But from my current understanding, dark fantasy, much like weird fiction, is atmospheric. It's about the feel. So in order to be dark fantasy, it's not just about the violence and the blood and all of that. There has to be some sort of emotional, atmospheric tone to it. And it needs to handle, like, I don't want to say darker or more mature because, like, heavier. That's the word I want. Heavier themes and things to them. Okay, I do feel this, but I also, on the other side, sometimes I have a BS in environmental science. So sometimes, hold on. Is that like bachelor's?
I believe so.
Okay. Whenever somebody says they have a BS, I'm like, you have a bullshit? I have to stop myself. Like, you have a bachelor's. It's very serious to respect. In environmental science, so sometimes I look at maps of worlds and look at the maps, dry lands versus grasslands people.
That is one thing that, it drives me insane when maps don't make sense.
Yes. I do think that that's one of those things, though, where it's like that's believable versus realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't necessarily have to be like super realistic, as long as it's like believable that, you know, this is how things are going. I don't think you have to do it exactly. Also, just because the atmosphere and environment works a certain way on Earth doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work that way on a magical planet somewhere else. So I understand, though, because my sister has an engineering degree, and I was just trying to talk to her about a book that I was reading, and the magic system was based on metals. And every time I tried to tell her something that I was annoyed by, she was like, wait, explain this metals thing to me again. I need to. And I'm like, okay. I have to let her be angry at the magic system so that I can move on and be angry about what I was angry about.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago, after taking like all of my geology classes, I sat down to try to read the Aragon series because I hadn't read it since I was in like junior high, and I looked at the map and got so I didn't even like go to page 1. I stopped at the map because the capital city is in just like the middle of a field. It's just like in a grassland with like no water source, like nothing.
It's also unfortunate that fantasy is held to that higher standard, because if you read like, or fantasy and sci-fi both, because if you read like a horror book, nobody would give a fuck. Like an exceptionally small percentage of people will give a fuck about this capital in the middle of the plains, because they're just like, okay, now everybody's gonna die because you're isolated. Like, that's gonna be the horror readers thinking. But fantasy and sci-fi, they're all like, all right, author, what do you mean you didn't research how planets work?
What do you mean, 15-year-old? You didn't think of shipping for your capital city?
You didn't think of how they were going to get their imports and their exports, which on the one hand I do get and I understand, because world building it's part of the draw of both fantasy and sci-fi, and it's one of the things that like people go there for. It's just kind of sucks that when you decide to write in those genres, that is that added thing that you do have to learn about so that it can be believable. It's like because of certain things, I was like, you know, in some desert cultures they do wear like very little because of things, but in other desert cultures they like cover from head to toe, and I was like, what is the difference? And I learned the difference was wet heat versus dry heat. And that changes how, you know, like if your sweat vanishes or not. And I was like, that is fascinating. And now I can up my world building game. Nobody asked me which is which because I don't remember.
If I'm not mistaken, it's dry heat. You want to wear like a bunch of, not like a ton of clothes, but you want to be covered up because I feel like it's also easier to get sunburnt in a dry heat.
I think so.
And so then in a wet heat, you're more concerned about just like steaming in your clothes. Yes. So you want to cover up less.
That sounds accurate. So everybody, but if Matt's wrong, it was him.
I am going off of like reasoning. I'm not going off of research here.
I was like, I'm just trying to use logic. Don't come for me.
That sounds right.
Yes. That sounds accurate to what I remember looking up. So
I will internalize that information.
It's true. Also like from what I can tell of my like geography knowledge, it makes sense.
Sometimes this when common sense should be in a scene isn't being used. So I need clarification on what you mean by common sense and when it is or isn't being used, because common sense is actually different based on how you grew up and what sense was needed to be common. So for like example here, because of where I grew up, I can go outside and I can tell you if it's going to storm or not because I can smell it. But like, I've amazed many of my friends who did not grow up in like farm-oriented places with high humidity that they're like, what do you mean you can smell the rain? And I'm like, I can motherfucking smell the rain. Can't you? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things. It's also, I'm trying to think of some like common sense things that would be specific to my area. How to spot black ice on the road. I had to teach my husband, who's from Florida, that. And here, that's considered common sense, but that's not common sense in Florida. Why would it be? They don't have black ice. Yeah. So, yes, I need to. That's one of those things where I feel sometimes it gets too criticized because common sense is just not commonly common for all the things. Yes, it's realistic. Oh no, that's not your fault. That's 100% me because I have a vulgar brain. Bachelor of Science, BA's Bachelor. Ah, thank you, Jay. Today I learned. Yes, Matt, you're so right. About something.
I think it was about the
Like
Aragon map
stream.
being.
Oh, probably.
bad.
What bad?
Yes.
Wait, you guys talked about maps while I was in
Yeah,
the
as soon as you stood up, we
it's
started talking
Matt's
about maps.
fault. Matt,
bathroom.
I blame Matt and Emily. It's their fault.
I was like, all right, Sophie's gone, guys. Maps.
Well, what did I
No,
miss?
I was talking about how much I hate the map in Aragon,
Oh my gosh,
and I
I
tried to reread it as an adult because I hadn't read that series since I was a kid, and I got
Okay,
to like not even the
here's the
first page. I
comment.
just opened to the map, and I hated it.
Here you go, Sophie, right here.
Was this? Whoa, hold on.
My problem with the Aragon map is that the capital city being in just the middle of a plain with no water source, like no means of shipping,
Bad
and
map
like
making.
I'm like, what are you doing? How like this is a like not modern world. How are they getting food and water and supplies and stuff to build things? How is it getting
gosh, I'm
there?
looking at it
Horses?
right now.
No.
Okay, Sophie
Oh my
found the
gosh, this
comment.
map sucks.
I was looking at the Aragon one. I must scroll down. I cannot ignore chat.
You can't just do that like that.
Not the map got you.
You can't. You can't just do
Can
that.
I just go on a tangent about maps?
What are some
just for
good
1
tips
second?
for world building when it comes to fantasy? Okay, we will return to you. Is it
Okay.
Cece? I want to say it's Cece.
Yeah, I do have thoughts on the world building.
Dry heat, you want less skin to show to the sun versus wet. Ah, there you go. Emily is with you, Matt. Say thank you to my 500,000 BS degree. Ah, look, we've got a trained professional to back us up. Dry heat, you need to cover up. Yeah, everybody's telling us now because we couldn't remember. Well, I couldn't remember. You didn't know to remember. Blame me all you want. See, I like you already, Emily. Taking the heat for us. Dry heat.
Is it a wet or a dry
We
heat?
don't know. Hey! Sophie suddenly regretting associating with either of us. Okay, so back to good tips for world building when it comes to fantasy. So the first thing I would say is research like cultures and how they came to be, because you will learn a lot that is functionally good for just all world building if you like start there. For example, one of the most consistent facts of how cultures spring up is that they find a major river or water source and they start there, and that is where they build up everything because they need water, and they will adapt to figuring out how to make food sources just based off of how they can live near the water and be able to forage or hunt for food. And like learning a lot about real world cultures and like their origins and then how they evolved will help to like kind of inspire and figure out how to build our own like cultures and societies. Did either of you two want to say something?
Yeah.
I do, but Sophie can go first.
So one of my favorite things. Hold on. What's it called? When you
Like
have
the only person I know,
letters?
Emily. Sorry, what's it called? What?
What's it called when you have some letters that are words?
Some letters?
Yeah. When you have some letters that are
That's
words.
Scrabble.
And also
Matt.
the letters stand for something.
Okay, an acronym?
Yes. An
Okay.
acronym.
I'm sorry, Matt kept speaking at the second half of your question.
I love when me and Sam both have brain fog and Matt is just
over there being neurotypical.
I am incapable of being helpful.
Anyways, I love a good acronym. And if you look up, I don't even know what you would look up, but there are a lot of like good world building acronyms to help you remember what things you need to go through and think about in your world. One of my favorite ones is grapes. Mostly I like it because I think it's funny. It's like, it stands for like geography, religion, art, politics, economics, and structures and like let me actually figure it out because I love grapes. I have a document that's called like Dodina is the name of like the world in my book. It's just called Dodina Grapes, and I think it's really funny. But it's also helpful. So
yes, it's useful to remember for me because the first whip I made starts with a desert nomad tribe culture. Yes. That's amazing. It's an interesting culture and climate to build off of for sure. Like in movies or shows where there is a dangerous situation that needs to be taken care of, but the character doesn't move with haste and get out of the dangerous situation as a common sense example. See, but that's like fight or flight instincts because some people freeze up, like, and they have no control over that. It's the whole.
Yeah, some people just aren't good in a crisis.
Yeah.
Oh, I have the grapes.
Yes.
The grapes. You got them.
Okay, the grapes are geography, religion, achievements. So that's like important works of art and like political figures and things like that. Politics, economics, and social structure. And I find that to be very helpful. I like utilize that. I also inserted a picture of actual grapes into my document for no reason. I want to emphasize that this is actually helpful, and I'm not just using it because it amuses me. It is helpful.
It sounds
that is
super
a really good
helpful.
acronym.
And I'm not just saying that because I said like geography and studying that and grape. That was the first one on grapes.
Grapes.
Yeah, I built a giant S world around it. Nice. Okay, my biggest thing I don't understand with world building, I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how to create a believable military. Research military tactics and how they work and why they work the way that they do, because all of the militaries in history have a reason for why they're structured the way they're structured or how they got the way that they got. I am from a military family. Like my dad served, all of my uncles served, my grandfather served, and therefore I actively avoid military fiction. But I have learned a lot about how military and stuff works. So yeah, I have a friend who's a huge military buff, and he will go on and on about Napoleon. So I guess Napoleon was a really good war strategist. Him and Alexander the Great. I'd start there, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, like if there's anything in your world building that you can't figure out how to structure, you just have to do research on real life.
Yeah. On like real world cultures in history.
So much of world building is honestly just researching to figure out how things logically would work if people were actually doing them. Military, like that's also something that I don't have knowledge on and like don't intuitively just like get. So there's
like
not really
one
like
thing
more in my book, but that's
like
definitely something that I would need to research.
One tip for sorry, I kept interrupting you. One tip for building military is know that there's going to be a central point. There's going to be a leader. Is your society that you're building one where the leader of the society is also the leader of your army? Or is your society designed so that these are actually two different people? Because one of the fascinating things with some cultures is sometimes if they're like a more like warrior or strength-based culture, then the actual leader will be on the front lines as like a sign of strength and of morale and power. I want to say the Spartans did that, but don't quote me on it. I could be wrong. And then in other cultures, the leader is too precious to put on the battlefield. They don't want to risk losing them. So then they will have a military commander or a military leader instead. So like if you start with your leaders and figuring out how you want that to go, you can kind of build your system from the top down. That's one way to do it. My biggest thing I don't understand with world... Oh, wait. Yeah. Shh, that never happened. Is it better to build the world before or after? So this is a tricky question because some people can get caught in what's known as world builder's disease, to where they just build for years and years and years and never actually do any writing. And here's the sad thing about world building. You are not going to use everything you come up with. It's not going to happen. There's no way or reason for absolutely everything you come up with in your world to be relevant to your novel. But if I'm wrong and you figure out how to do that, power to you. However, you also can't really start writing without the world because the characters are going to be influenced by the society and the world that they grew up in. So what I would generally recommend doing is starting small, like the area that your story takes place in. You're going to need to know that. The area that your main character is from, you're going to need to know that. And then just slowly build out as you need to build more and more of the world. Would either
I would say just like build the world before you start, but don't finish the world before you start.
That's a good way to put it.
So like, as an example, I had, for my novel, I have an idea of the world. I have a map sketch, not a real one, and like an idea of like the culture and stuff like that, but I don't have like all these details hammered out. That comes in more as necessary. When I get to a place and I'm like, I need a festival here, I come up with a festival. I didn't have that ahead of time. I can just do it then and there.
Do you have anything you want to add, Sophie?
Yeah. I just don't want to cut you off. So just a bit of like anecdotal advice about this topic. When I first started writing The Rebel Bard, it was a project that I was doing for fun. I didn't plan on taking it seriously, so I didn't outline it at first. I was just kind of writing the parts that seemed interesting to me, which means I didn't really do any world building before I went into it. I just had like some solid ideas of characters and scenes that I wanted to happen. And when I realized it was kind of good and I wanted to take it seriously, I outlined the story, and I went through and wrote it. But I had like no foundational world building, and that made it so that I basically had to do my world building like in post, and like that made the editing process kind of hellish for me because a lot of my editing was just going through and like fleshing out the world details and making it more believable, and making it feel like a place that people actually lived in. So I do think it's one of the more important things that I would say to have fully like fleshed out before you start writing is like understanding the main culture of the group that you're writing, because it's not just like places and buildings and things that you're world building. It's like social dynamics and like the way people dress and talk to each other and family power structures and things like that. And I feel like those things really shape the way that you write, and you kind of have to understand that kind of thing before you actually go into writing it, because it's not the kind of thing that you can tack on afterwards unless you want to do like 4 or 5 rounds of editing just for the world building like I've had to do.
She says with regret.
Yes,
on her face.
with regret.
One thing I wanted to add on to Matt's comment, which I don't know if it also works with what Sophie was saying, but I'll pretend that it does.
Okay.
Is also when you do your world building, don't get like hung up on this is absolutely how things have to be and I can't like change or alter anything, because babies, this is your world. You can change shiz if you need to change shit. You can add festivals. You can add a new religion. You can be like, you know what? I really didn't like that fruit that I added in last week. That fruit's gone. It doesn't matter. It always comes back. Food is my primary example. That and werewolves. So it's like, yeah, it's your world and you can do what you want. Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to do all that post world building, Sophie.
No, and I definitely agree with you. And like, I think because I didn't figure things out initially, I also changed my mind about a lot of things, which is fine. Like, I think that's a natural part of the writing process.
It's just when your draft is done that makes it a lot harder, which is
Yeah.
The other thing is with outlines, I think fantasy and sci-fi is one of the most heavily required to hold on. I got distracted by Fox questioning something in my Milo note. I heavily recommend outlining fantasy and sci-fi more so than I do in other genres because of the world building and because the world building is such a big part of it. Like even if you're writing contemporary fantasy where it's like, yes, you have the framework already done because it takes place on our Earth.
Right.
It's still like there's some sort of fantastical element that you're adding to it, and you need to figure out how that's going to be added to it.
Well, and I also feel like, which I could be wrong in this because I don't write much contemporary, but I feel like with fantasy and sci-fi in particular, there's so much that doesn't make it onto the page, but is still important that you think of. And if you're just doing all of that as you're drafting, that's going to make your edit ridiculous because you will not know that has to be cut until you've written it. Whereas if you're outlining and planning and all that stuff, you can look at it from there and decide what needs to be actually on the page and what you just need to know as the world builder.
Yes. Right. So see, if you have a nomadic culture that has a lot of horses, you'll get cavalry and horseback archers. Or if you have people who had chariots, they have chariot warfare. As to the war question. Oh, no, it jumped. Hold on. If you have an empire-like structure, then there's likely to be an organized army. Let's see, and then it was confirmed the Spartans' kings were on the front lines. Not y'all actually breaking down a month-long writer block with your leader versus military leader combo. We're happy to help.
Sometimes you just got to hear other people talk about your problem and it will get solved. That is the main thing I use my CPs for. I throw my problems at them and they talk about them and then it's fixed.
And sometimes you just got to ask Sam a question and then get 8 hours of explanation. It's so good. I like CPs, definitely critique partners.
Yeah,
get them.
Invaluable.
Essential.
Nice. So world building, the important parts. Grapes. Look up.
Grapes.
Sophie,
Grapes.
would you be so kind as to type grapes into the chat?
Oh.
But yeah, I would say before
And
you
I
start
would-
drafting, world build the important parts
The
would be what I say.
Also, most militaries have a complex chain of command. Actually, not. I would disagree with this statement, especially like in ancient worlds or in fantasy worlds that aren't like super high tech. They're not all of them are complex, but there are many that do have a complex military system. So, this is just one of those things where it's like you need to expand and read about lots and lots of cultures, not just like the predominant ones. And ancient ones too, especially. Because like one of the assumed things in fantasy is that the levels of technology are not like super high. Although there are, you can have it. There's nothing against it. I'm just saying normally there's not. So the ancient world is generally better. Go talk to your daddy. Yeah, daddy's awake. Sorry, my child's been giving me weird faces, so I just give them right back.
Sure.
World building the basics and fill in the details. Yes. I always have a vague idea before I write. If I just world build, then I would never actually write. Yeah. Like I said, there's a balance to it, definitely. Okay, that's very helpful because world building seems kind of daunting. And, oh, hold on. I see Sophie's comment. I'm going to go pin it. I'm sorry. There's a bunch of new people here. I get brain fog. I don't remember if I told you all that, but it's a thing. And overwhelming, but now that makes sense. Yeah, that's one of the things. World building can seem like super overwhelming because it's like there's so much that you need to do, but that's why you just start with one little spot. And I have pinned in the chat the GRAPES, an acronym that Sophie recommended.
I'm so glad you explained achievements because every time I see it in the GRAPES acronym, I'm just like, oh yeah, like perfect attendance. And I'm just like, that's not world building.
Does the society you're building value attendance, Matt?
You need to know that kind of thing. Were they on the dean's list?
Look up a few videos and post about how to go about it and see what works for you. Yes, I agree with this as well. I've personally never really thought about world building when I wrote. I would just write to write, but this is helpful to know. It is a lot. I don't know about your background, but I have a more nature background, so anything outside of that, I feel like I'm not an expert. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by my background, but my background is 12-year-old wrote a novel that was published by another 12-year-old, went I got this, and has been obsessive about being an author ever since. So I've got 18 years of obsessive research into so many things related to writing. And now I can finally share it with the world. But if everyone felt like that, we wouldn't have any fantasy.
Right, just gotta do
I need
something.
clarification. I didn't even know fantasy needed to be world built, to be honest, especially since I normally write random romance stories way back when I was still learning to write. I mean, that's fair.
Well, if you were writing a contemporary fantasy, and this is more a question than a statement, would
Matt,
you
let
need?
me tell you, if it's a fantasy romance and it's for romance readers, we don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like,
We're
if
like,
it's a
world, what
contemporary
world?
fantasy,
Just-
like, do you need to do much
Yeah.
world building?
Okay, technically you do need it, and there will be readers who are there for the world building. But if like the primary audience is normally romance fantasy, then most of us, we're there for the romance. We don't actually care about the politics, and we're like, are they running away together or not?
Yeah, or like an urban fantasy, for example, because that's
Well,
our world cities,
yes,
correct?
that is an urban fantasy, takes place within a city, usually modern day. However,
Yeah.
does not have to be, from what I read. It
So
can
in that
actually
case,
be the
would
random
you
cities
really
around.
have much world building to do?
Yeah,
Not a
because-
whole
Or is that
lot,
more just
no.
like magic systems at that point, if there's
Yeah.
even magic?
It's really, if you're writing anything contemporary, then you're writing it based on the current modern Earth. So, like, the only world building I think that you have to do there is the fantastical elements that you are adding to the world. So if you are adding werewolves, if you are adding vampires, if you are adding elves or fae, you need to figure out how that works and mixes with the world and how it historically has worked and mixed with Earth history. So there is some world building, but no, it is not to the same not to the same level as if you're building a whole ass planet. The only one of these that I feel okay. I can't pin 2 comments, or I would.
That's okay.
Right. Well, the story I am writing is an adventure type of story with fantasy aspects and mystery and romance weaved in. So that sounds like an epic journey, probably. Which I'm checking. A heroic fantasy, maybe. I haven't gotten to that part. I'm still in ye old ass shit. But from my understanding of heroic fantasy is the high adventures and you gotta solve shit and maybe there's some smooching.
Before we move away from world building, if we are, one world building tip that I always bring up anytime this conversation happens is from the.
Oh.
Sorry, Matt, I had to do it.
I always have to bring it up. No, you don't.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I tried so hard not to, but I was like, I have to do it to Matt.
Oh my god.
All right, sorry, go ahead. The one world building tip you always bring up.
That was good. That I always bring up, especially from the like geography and like monster side of things, is to watch nature documentaries like Planet Earth or the like, because there are some crazy things on our own planet that are so cool, and in a fantasy world you can dial that up to 11 and make it even more awesome. And it is a great resource for like inspiration for building the literal world itself, like the geography of it, the animals, the creatures, what have you. So yeah, that's my big world building tip is National Geographic.
Matt also just loves nature documentaries.
I also just love nature documentaries.
Yeah, they're good,
so they're so good.
They're
You
so
learn
good.
animal dick facts and win at Jeopardy from them.
You win Jeopardy from them.
For those who don't know, for some reason, my husband is obsessed with animal dick facts, and so when I made a Jeopardy board for my annual end of the year party, I had a category dedicated to this, and Matt refused to be outdone. So he learned a lot of things.
I
so that
studied.
He could fight Chris at his own things. So as far as I would world build it just enough to write the part that you want to write, and then just add the world building to it, because you world build as you write too.
Yeah.
Like I said, you gotta like get enough of it just to like get started and to know where you're going, and then world build as you need and as you go. The nature documentary is popular. To be fair, if anyone is creating an urban fantasy, is The Immortal Empire by Kate Locke. Those that don't know it, it's basically modern times with Victorian figures plus werewolves/vampires. Yeah. I do enjoy nature docs. All right, so that I'm actually going to take that into... I'm sorry, Fox is putting notes on my notes now. I made a point where I was like, when to world build, and then I had some sassy comments, and he loves the world building, so he sassied my sassy back.
You sassied your sassy back.
Yeah. All right, but I'm going to take what Matt said, and I'm going to go into another talking point, which is humanoid races and like their monster levels. What do y'all like prefer? Because for me, I like both. I like humanoid races that are kind of humanoid. They're more human than noid. And then, I like the humanoid races that are more monster than human. So what's y'all's take on it? And also a good way to build those is Matt's nature documents.
I really like, especially in
Hold on, Sophie, we lost you. You're very quiet. Where'd you go?
Hello? Am I so quiet?
Yes.
I didn't do anything.
Okay, there you go. We can
Am
hear
I
you
back?
again. Yes.
Nothing happened.
I think your mic went over like an inch. I think that's it. It just went to your shoulder, and now I couldn't hear you anymore. Ah, no, I can hear that.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure where my microphone is. I wasn't sure if it was this or if it was automatic.
I think this is it, because I definitely heard you assaulting.
The only way for me to know if my microphone is this one or the laptop one is if I rub it and people go, ah! What was I talking about?
The amount of Noid.
Do you like
the Noid level?
It's my new contribution.
Spectrum. So okay. I am trying to collect myself.
Sorry.
Okay. I like races that are like very human but have something almost like uncanny valley about them, where it's like, ooh, he looked just like a human, except there was like a twinkle in his eye that was very monstrous or something like that. Maybe I also like that, especially in like fantasy romance. I don't know, I think it's spicy.
I too am into the fantasy romance. So I also just realized that my Google Chrome was turned down from earlier when I was in a call and listening to music, so that might have been part of my problem. I apologize.
It was only me, right? Matt was not quiet.
To be fair, he is a loud ass motherfucker like me.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's true. I am.
So yes, you were probably at a reasonable level, and Matt and I are just loud.
Talking loud.
Yeah, because literally, like, my Google Chrome was at this. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, Sam and I just scream. It's fine.
Guys, it's okay.
My mic is in the other room right now.
You joke about that, but Chris will be in the other room and his friends will hear me.
Oh my god.
I'm loud. But yes, sorry.
So for me, when it comes to fantasy races, I don't super care whether they're more human or more noid. The thing I don't like, and I feel like this is an unpopular opinion, but maybe it isn't. I am so tired of Tolkien races. I don't want to read about elves. I don't want to read about dwarves. I don't want to read about orcs. Unless you are going to do something different with them than just, oh, the elves are prim and proper. The dwarves make shit. The
Okay,
orcs are
sir,
stupid
but
and
I
break
like
things.
high society snobby ass elves, and I can't explain why.
I
I-
like them, but I'm like,
I get you though. I do.
why
like
can't the
elves.
dwarves be snobby? Or make your own snobby race? Why are they pointy-eared wood people?
So, like, Tolkien races, you know, as they are with their characteristics, they belong in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, they're fun.
Yeah, like, I'm
I don't
so
wanna
tired
read
of
novels
copy
about
and
them.
paste.
Dungeons and Dragons may have stole them from Tolkien. Might
yeah.
have. Might
Oh,
have
yeah.
had to change the name from because they had hobbits, but they had to change it to
Uh-huh,
halflings because
halflings.
of copyright.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I think the races are fun. I don't want to read novels about them.
Right.
I want to
So-
play them.
I have mixed feelings on it because one of my biggest issues with the fantasy race default being the Tolkien races is that he took elves and dwarves from other cultures and changed them from what they
Yeah.
were. And so it's like people, when you say dwarf, they think of a Tolkien dwarf.
Mhm,
But like I think of a Norse dwarf.
mhm.
But nobody writes about Norse dwarves except Rick Riordan. He does a good job of it. But nobody else cares about the Norse dwarves that I know of. Please drop recommendations below if you know of any. But yeah. Now, as far as monster races, I like them on the whole ass spectrum. I like it when it's like, oh, well, they look human, but their ears are a little point, or their eyes are a little too
Yeah,
big.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you get that weird uncanny, because that's kind of like that to me. That's creepier than an
That's
actual.
what I like about
like-
it. It's like
Mhm.
And then
ooh,
like,
beautiful but creepy.
and then the anime weeb in me is all like, yes, give me the human people with the animal ears and the tails, and that's it. I'm good.
About to say
It's
that.
great, especially when they don't understand human mannerisms or
Yes.
boundaries and
They
stuff.
have
And
like
that's
slightly caddish like
yes.
mannerisms or
Some
something.
of them have a little bit of fur here, or they're like
yeah.
they just have actual like cat or like
Oh my
dog
gosh,
or
I'm so into
bird
that.
mannerisms or whatever, and it's great. And then just keep sliding the Noid factor up until we get to like, mer creatures that are covered from head to tip of their tail in scales with like the freaky teeth and the big black eyes that just have the
Yes.
all of it. I love all of it. And like I have that range of races in my current whip, the Silver Air. One of
Yeah.
my favorite ones is the Palu, who are my nature people. And there are two primary kinds of Palu. There's the flora and the fauna. And so like the flora Palu, like some of them have like petals for their hair, and they can like have sleep pollen because poppy started thing, and just different things like that. And then the fauna, like some of them are just kind of like, wolf men basically, or the anime peoples.
Yes.
And there's like that right there within their two halves, I can just do my whole range on the scale. And then like my mer people are shapeshifters because I can do whatever the fuck I want. And so they can like be whole people or just the monster fish people of my dreams.
Mm-hmm. So I already talked about like my first preference. I totally forgot that like, the anime type is allowed on this list.
No. Yes,
Because I
damn
have
it,
a
that's
very
fantasy too.
deeply rooted love for animal people.
Great.
Nobody take this out of context. Please.
The hesitancy in your voice.
Look, it's like when people try to talk about like furries or people who don't like those. I'm like, do you like werewolves? Because guess what a werewolf is?
Can I share something from my childhood as an anime person at 8 years old?
Yes.
Okay,
I
so-
then have to go to chat because chat has been speaking.
I used to be obsessed, deeply obsessed with cat girls, where I like to the point where I wore like cat ears to homeschool co-op every Friday. And
Girl, all my
I,
avatars.
Like, what?
I said all my avatars were cat girls.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are still cat girls to this day if the
And
website will
I
allow.
was like, I would always talk about, like, I wish I really had ears and a tail in real life. And I remember one time, I was probably like 10, and one of my friends was like, Sophie, I gotta be honest, I don't wish I had ears and a tail. Like, I'm good. And I was genuinely just so hurt. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I thought we were on the same page.
The betrayal.
The betrayal.
I don't want cat ears.
Okay.
So sad.
Both is good, depends on the setting. Oh, hold on. There was up here. Can I get an explanation on this first? Yes, give me just 1 second and then I will re-explain.
I believe it got explained, actually.
Yeah, probably. My story starts on Earth, but then goes to other planets and dimensions. So there's a thing for that. It's called portal fantasy.
Yeah.
It's a genre.
Yeah, portal fantasy is a genre.
Yes. Also, if you're going into video games, isekai.
Isekai, yeah.
Sophie's like, I'll beat Sam to it. I like a whole mix of all kinds of races. Currently got a character who looks human but is really an Earth genie in disguise. Sometimes he just does shit that has the other sketching there. It's like, wait, what?
I love the character explanation that's sometimes
like
he
the
just
phrase.
does shit. It's like, yeah,
Just shit,
same.
like, whatever. Or noids are my new word for the other half of humanoid.
We were just being
Whatever that
silly.
happens.
That means, like, our
Like, creature.
humanoid actually means nothing. We were just being silly. So it was just like,
Yeah.
is it human or is it not human? But noid doesn't actually mean that.
I prioritize having fun on the
Mhm.
streams, so whenever like we misspeak or anything, we tend to just run with it. It's just
Yeah.
things. And I was like, so I like things that are more human and then more noid, and yeah,
We liked it, and we just
Isn't-
kept going with it.
use it.
We just ran the bit. We're still running the bit. We will probably never put the bit down.
It's probably gonna be. I'm gonna use it forever now
Yeah.
with my friend groups because like it's just there's no word for it. And you know what? If Shakespeare could make up all his fucking words, so can I.
Exactly. You can just say whatever you want. And
I am definitely tired of
You're not
normal
going to jail
humans,
for it.
unless that's the actual intent. Yeah. See. Okay. So here's my thing. I love humans. I love humans in fantasy. I am aware I am in the minority of liking normal humans in fantastical settings, at least from everybody that I hear talk about it. But I really love seeing people interact with non-people and things better than them because humans are fascinating. We are one of the most adaptable and endurable species to exist. So seeing
Yeah.
like humans have to figure out how to survive and thrive and interact and all, I love it. What I don't love is when it's like, here's human race A and human race B and human
Yeah.
race C, and they all look the same, but they're like, these ones are really elves.
yeah.
Like, but are they?
These
But are
blue,
they?
but they're just people.
Yeah. So
I did not know that was a minority opinion because I'm the same way. I kind of actually
Yeah.
love seeing
Matt,
humans
just
deal with.
remember, we're just the same. You're my apprentice.
Yeah,
You're-
yeah, that's true.
One of my
That's fair.
favorite things about humans in fantasy is when, like, human shortcomings compared to their magical peers
Yes.
turn out to be advantages.
Glad you said that because I was about to say that as well.
I think that's a really cool trope.
Underdog stories, yo.
Yeah.
I love it because it makes you feel so good to be a human.
It's also, in reality, we are very much the underdogs. We cannot take a lion 1v1.
Oh, yeah.
We are not equipped. However,
But we know how to make tools.
we know
Yes,
how to.
We
though.
did create guns.
And we know how to sweat.
I'm okay with both. Just depends on the context. But I also love reading sci-fi, so all types of being. Again, falls under the same thing. Don't tell me we got 80 types of sexy alien that are all just human with slightly tweaked. No,
Yeah.
that bothers me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In the Aragon series, the dwarves are very self-absorbed. They are not the same as the hoity-toity elves of which we speak. But yes, dwarves. Okay, so here's the thing. Dwarves tend to be very full of themselves and kind of narcissistic, but they're also like super rowdy and very like clan-like, and they're always like, and they just like indulge and love to party and be brusque, and it's part of the reason that I enjoy dwarfs. However, I have this special place in my heart for the stuck-up elves that are just like,
Elf.
oh yes,
Love a posh elf.
you vermin.
I feel the same way, Sam.
I can't even explain it, because let me tell you, if I talk to people like that in real life, I am ready to duke it out.
Yeah.
But reading about an elf that's like that,
I love an elf
gives
king.
me life.
Love an elf king sitting on his woody throne, like.
Yes, I know. I am better looking than you and more highly skilled in every way.
Okay. Sorry to like talk about watching Lord of the Rings, but
to be fair, look, here's the thing. Okay. I like Lord of the Rings. Okay. I like the Hobbit. I enjoy it. Right. I hate the culture. I hate the way that people cling to it. Okay. It's the fan base, not Tolkien himself, not his work or anything. I hate what has happened.
Okay, cool. Same.
Nobody is shit talking Tolkien. Sorry.
Anyways, what I was gonna say is like, I did not like the Hobbit movies, but Lee Pace as Thranduil, like, I just
as the Elf King.
Yes,
definitely. He's
first of all, Lee Pace is the man of my dreams, but just him in that role, it's just so perfect with like the long white hair and just like the,
He's great. He's easily one of the best parts.
Oh my gosh, so good.
He's so great.
Biggest eyebrows you've ever seen. High cheekbones, just like, his crown.
Jay backs my use of I am interpreting this as Jay backing my use of Noid to mean other.
Okay.
Sorry. So humanoid means human-like. So the question is more human or more other. Yes.
Thank you, linguist, for backing our shit posting.
Thank you for making me look more skilled than I was.
Yes. We
appreciate you. Not they saying they were okay on the cat ears and tail. I would have felt betrayed as well.
Thank you.
No, it really sounds like a solid word meeting. And look, see, I am more useful than Slipstream. I'm sorry, I can't let it go. See, if it's humans having to see that. Hold on, I'm sorry. See, here's the thing. A whole ass subgenre was created because two dudes were like, but my novel doesn't fit into regular fantasy or any of its existing shiz. What about Slipstream? Yes, that's what I am now. If they can do that, I can fucking use Noid. And
bro, you don't understand. My novel is just like not like any other novel. So like it has to have its own genre. I'm so special and unique.
See, if it's humans having to adapt.
Slipstream fills me with violence.
Well, I hate it. When I first said it, saw it, and it was like Slipstream fantasy. I was like, oh wait, so are we like? Is this like a teleporting thing? Does it go? No, I was very disappointed, and this is.
I want that man to slip into a stream.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. See, if it's humans having to adapt, then I love that. But if they don't have to adapt to fantasy things going on, then I'm like, I want to see them struggle or find a different way of doing things. Are we talking about humans transplanted into a fantasy world or humans having grown up into a fantasy world? Because I agree with this in certain contexts. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I just would like more clarity. Linguist got your back. Jay always here to help. I forgot Fox had left comments on my notes and I came back and I was like, the fuck? We have to wait till Sophie gets back because now it is the turn for her talking point, which is fantasy food.
Well, while we wait, maps?
What about cartography?
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say about this until Sophie gets back. Maps.
I know a great cartographer. This is us being silly, but also a serious note. Sophie actually does make fantasy maps by commission, and her maps are so good, so pretty.
Check them out.
Her stuff's linked down below if you want to go check those out. We will talk about something else while we wait for Sophie, because she didn't tell me where she was going, so I have no idea how long she'll be back. How long she'll be back? How long she'll be gone?
When Fox sent that Matt gif, I hadn't opened my phone yet, and I was really afraid that I had done something wrong. And then I saw the following gift, and I was like,
So for those who are new, because we do have quite a few new faces.
Yeah, we do.
Fox is my bestie / behind the scenes sort of manager with me of my channel. He makes all of my thumbnails and my advertising, my Matt, what are they called at the top? Banners? Yes,
Banners.
He makes those and stuff for me, and also yells at me when I do things that I probably shouldn't do. It doesn't do a lot of good because I lack embarrassment and or fucks to give half of the time. But he tries. Pray for Fox. Yes, praise Sophie while she's not here.
Always.
Always. Can you guys be hired as beta readers by chance? I mean,
beta readers are generally volunteers.
But if you want to pay me, I'm not going to turn it down. I just need to know, what's the length, what's the timeline, because I will be honest. I am a stay-at-home mom with a chronic illness who is trying to write a book and run a platform. My time is extremely limited.
Yeah.
Also, brain power.
I do not currently have the availability to beta read.
Yes.
But perhaps in the future.
Yeah, it all depends. I cannot take on critique partners, but I will sign up for betas for free if I have time and I find the story interesting. So when you're ready for beta readers,
a good place to find beta readers is Cyborg Central, Jenna Moressi's writing group that you can access via her Patreon. There's a whole channel for finding. That is where we all met. So there's a channel there for finding beta readers. It's also great for meeting other writers. That's where I got a lot of my beta readers for my short story. Highly recommend.
I also run the worldwide Writeathon writing community server, which has a room for betas as well, and that is linked down below. You can find me both places, and I help all the peoples when I am online. The time is non-existent. Indeed, it is non-existent. I think Fox is... I see a red one from Fox, and I'm like, oh, he's going to yell at me for almost sort of maybe thinking about beta reading for somebody. He's not enough time for Fox things. Drama. I know. Okay. I wasn't as yelled at as I thought I would be. So we were waiting for you because we're doing fantasy food.
Ooh, well, I just had my dinner.
Oh my gosh, perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
You guys have to let me know if you can hear me chewing.
Oh, trust me, I will.
Okay.
I thought you meant you will hear her chewing.
No. I can't. I'm one of those people where if I hear people chewing, it triggers that little rage thing in my brain. Yeah. So I'm very poor Chris, who I don't know how the man, I don't know if it's him. I don't know if I just have supersonic hearing, but he will have his mouth closed and I will still hear him chewing from across the room. And I have to go in the other room. The poor man.
So about fantasy food, I want to say I don't actually have any real takes on fantasy food. I just always enjoy food in world building. And I think it's a much more important part of world building than people give it credit for, because food is such an important part of culture. And yeah, I think people should pay more attention to the food in their books and not just do cured meat and bread and stuff, which is also good, but at least have a reason.
Don't besmirch the bread, Sophie.
If I could just eat cured meat and bread and cheeses for my whole life, then I would. Okay, if I could just live on charcuterie boards, then I would. But
because we have a bread demon who will throw gifts at you for besmirching the bread.
Who is it?
Fox.
Oh, who's a fox?
Makes his own bread from scratch.
Oh my gosh, I used to do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me on fantasy food.
Okay, so I think Fox was going to cover this, but yeah, beta readers are for finished drafts. If you have unfinished work, you usually want a critique partner. During the writing process, critique partners are fellow writers who go back and forth with you to help you. Some critique partners wait till the draft is done. One of my critique partners waits until they have 100 pages and then sends 100 pages. Another critique partner of mine, we exchange chapter by chapter. It helps. Sometimes I send it section by section because I'm needy and he's used to it. For like short stories, it's usually, you just exchange short stories when they're done. And then after the critique partner and the like self-edit and everything, you start recruiting beta readers. Beta readers are readers, sometimes also writers, but primarily they're readers. And the kind of feedback that they're going to give is different than the kind that a critique partner would give. I have a video on both critique partners and beta readers, which may be helpful. You mean people who have been traveling cross country shouldn't stew on their night dinner? Shouldn't make stew as their night meal?
I do have stuff to say for fantasy food. I just wanted to type about the beta readers
Oh, no, that's
thing
fine.
first.
Go ahead.
So yeah,
I
kind
just-
of like what Sophie was saying, it's a really, really good way to get a look at the culture. And also, I feel like I always bring up geography with world building. It's because I love geography.
I was about to too, so go ahead.
But like, if they're in a climate that's gonna open the door for a lot of vegetation, you might see a lot of kind of more lighter vegetable and fruit filled meals. Whereas if they're in like some northern snowy climate, you can't grow food. You can't grow fruits and vegetables up there, or what you can grow is really limited. So you're going to have a lot more meat, a lot more like starchy vegetables because they can handle a colder climate better. And it gives you a look at that. It also lets you see like shipping type stuff. If they're having a bunch of like chili peppers in a snowy place, maybe that kind of gives you an inkling that they can get produce from a place that grows produce and have more advanced shipping methods, stuff like that. So the ingredients themselves can kind of tell you the geography of the place.
And on a note of creating fantasy food, in case everybody hasn't figured this out, I have a rather healthy level of confidence and self-esteem, and I dare say I'm really good at creating fantasy food. A common complaint / compliment I get is that whenever I write food in a story, people then yell at me that they want to eat it. I think whatever barbecue they had at the festival.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See, so the thing with creating fantasy food is it doesn't actually have to be like that, like fancy or weird. Just play off of like real foods. So for example, if you're writing about like an island culture, you can kind of like look to real world island cultures and what kind of things that they make, which is a lot of fried things, kind of things barbecued over a skewer and a stick. Obviously heavy fish, but if there's also forest and trees around, there will be some sort of wild game. And if you want it to have a particular fantasy feel, pick like a somewhat well-known fantasy creature. So like you're writing about the tangy scent of barbecue as the basilisk meat turned on the skewer. Something like that. Is it?
Oh, go ahead.
Because like tangy barbecue is something that's like cemented from the real world that a lot of people can relate to. So then when you throw in basilisk meat, people are kind of like, oh, well, they've at least heard of a basilisk, even if they don't know what a basilisk is. Or at the very least, they can gather that it's some sort of animal that can be barbecued and probably tastes delicious. Unless you hate barbecue, then I don't know.
I was going to say that food and fantasy, and I guess just in like fiction in general, can also be like a method of storytelling. For example, the main setting of my novel is like a place that has been essentially colonized, and kind of a plot point is that like the colonizers don't know how to cook the native food in a way that is actually good. So like the main character, when she ends up like hanging out with like locals and eating their food, she's like, oh shit, this is what these ingredients are actually supposed to taste like. Everything at my house is bland and terrible and cooked wrong. So like just like little things like that can be like a big, you can use food to like tell your story.
Yes.
It can also build character as well. So, like, as an example, like if you have a fantasy world that's like not modern, more like medieval type stuff, if a character or if the meal has a lot of spices in it, that wouldn't be something that would be accessible in most cases. So then that would show sort of like a sign of wealth. Whereas if you're going for more like a peasant meal, it could
be a sign of wealth depending on your societal structure.
And so like, or you have your more peasant meal, you could have like more like boiled stuff, more like easier to come by ingredients and cooking methods. And
easier to cook quickly and store.
Yeah. Also, go ahead. The other thing I was going to say about food, and this is not a fantasy exclusive thing, it's also really good for like tone setting. So like one thing I like to try to do is if I'm going for more of a relaxed kind of characters get a little bit of a breather, a lot of times I'll have them eating and talk about the food actually being like good and what it tastes like and stuff, because that's something that's just eating good food is just naturally comforting to people. So it's a good way to show that your characters are comfortable if they're enjoying their meal, or if they're uncomfortable, they might not be enjoying the meal, and you can talk about how the stuff just ain't hitting, right?
Yeah. And to add to the tone setting, you can also like if you can write about a character who's like having a bad day, and you have the tone, and like, you know, they were hit by a sudden downpour and they were not prepared, so now they are sopping wet and they're frozen to the bone, and they're coming in, but they smell the warm the like warm and telling scent of their mom's stew, and it like fills the air and it like warms them from inside and everything, and they recognize like the sweet scent, because we're pretending this is a sweet stew, the sweet scent of it, and they know that it's going to taste really nice with that melted butter on the fluffy bread. So, and it like completely kind of changes the tone a bit, and like a lot of readers will just feel that like relief with their character.
Yeah.
And for characterizing, if you're like writing a group setting and you have like one character who they're like the middle or the youngest child or something, and they didn't have like a lot of responsibility in home and everything, so they don't actually know how to cook anything, and then you've got like one character who kind of keeps to themselves, and then they like cook a really good meal, and everyone's like, well, I didn't know you knew how to cook, and they're like, well, yeah, I grew up taking care of my little brother or something. I can like give some backstory there and everything.
It's also a really good, like, if you need, I do this too much, honestly, but like, you know, you have a dialogue scene. Pretty much anytime I have a dialogue scene, I'm like, all right, they're eating. But the reason I do it is because it's a little bit of a shortcut, because it's a really good way to get a lot of sensory details into a scene, because cooking and eating is so sensory. You see the food, you taste the food, you smell the food, you feel the food. And so it gets all of your senses involved really quickly. And so that's why I write entirely too many eating scenes.
Just gotta apply those senses to other scenes too, Matt. I have a part in my current whip in which character A teaches character B how to cook, which is good times for them getting the romance. Yeah, I also am a big fan of this and using cooking as a bonding thing. Yes. Make me hungry, why don't you? I'm sorry, I should put like a warning for my streams. May make you hungry.
Have you read Till Pizza Do Us Part? Because that'll also make you very hungry.
What? Why are you yelling about lamb sauce? Are you Gordon Ramsay over there? Oh my gosh. We haven't even seen Hell's Kitchen in like a year.
I just love how you can't hear anything and you just hear Chris go, "Goddamn lamb sauce" from the other room. Like...
Sophie said they couldn't hear anything, and then all they heard was you, "Goddamn lamb sauce." Also, for those who don't know, that's my husband. He occasionally streams with me, or more commonly yells in the
You
background.
can hear
of
him
memes.
laughing and yelling from the other room.
His laugh is more famous than anything I've ever done on my
Iconic.
channel.
Chris's laugh.
It needs to be a ringtone.
You hear the way that they're just drooling over it. It's great.
One more point for the cooking. That is another non-fantasy exclusive. But a character cooking a really good meal, at least in my experience, is a really good way to make readers just like immediately trust that character and just kind of form a bond with them. It's just because like they make a meal for the main character and it's like, all right, their vibes are good. They made yummy
Okay.
pasta.
You
The
say
other-
that, but have them sprinkle substance over it, and all of a
The
sudden,
other-
nobody trusts
All of
you.
a
that's the
sudden.
thing. Like, I also like that when that's being subverted. Like, you have like
Yes.
Hannibal
Love
Lecter, who's like a gourmet chef, inviting people over for dinner parties to like eat people that he's like cooking.
Yeah.
He's like,
Oh my
sous
gosh.
vide a calf, like
Let me
human
tell
calf
you.
or something.
I have this weird cannibal sensor. Like Chris and I will be watching anything, and then some characters will pop up, and I'll be like, "They're cannibals," and he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I promise you, they're eating people." And then, sure enough, by the end of the episode or whatever, they were cannibals, and he's like, "How do you
Vibe.
always
He
know?"
gives
And I'm
off
like,
the cannibal vibe.
Maybe
"Let me
we
tell
just
you."
watch different
Just know.
things. That does not come up enough for me to be like, and then the cannibals show up in the show.
Well, I was watching Van Helsing on Netflix, and I get to this one part, and they go and they meet these like people, and I'm like, they're eating vampires, and it's like, how do you trust me? They're eating vampires, and sure
They're
the
eating
fuck enough, they were eating vampires. And I'm like, I know, always, I know. All right, do either of you have a preference for the next talking point?
Nah, whatever we want to hit.
All right. Old fantasy, which I wrote old fashioned. What the fuck? Old fantasy versus new fantasy. Of course, the woman who likes sociopaths has a cannibal sensor. Look, I know who to avoid, and I know who to make friends with. Now, pizzas, all this pizza talk. I watch too many crime shows that I watch a different genre and expect someone to die. Okay, so I think that there is the biggest like split, the biggest thing keeping the fantasy like fandom as a whole split is old fantasy standards versus like modern fantasy standards. Because for a modern fantasy audience in general, of course, this doesn't fit everybody, people want like less purple prose, less unneeded exposition, more actual character interactions and plot and dialogue. They don't, if they're going to get 500 pages of book now, they don't want 250 pages of that being exposition on world building for things that we don't really need to know. Instead, they, want stuff that matters and will be useful. But then, like, you have people who grew up on the old fantasy, who read Tolkien and that one guy who wrote The Wheel of Time, whose name escapes me. But The Wheel of Time and all of those, which I refer to as old man fantasy voice, because it's old fantasy and normally written by old men. And sounds like an old man narrating to me every time. So, and if you like the old man fantasy voice, that's fine. If you want to write old man fantasy voice, that's fine too. It's just a lot of new fantasy is held to these same standards and heavily critiqued for not being the old style of fantasy when it's not trying to be.
Yeah.
No, I am very much a proponent of new fantasy.
Thank you, Robert Gordon.
I have never been able to finish an old fantasy novel, as when I tried to read The Lord of the Rings, I tried so hard and I literally fell asleep multiple times while trying to read it, because I cannot personally handle that level of exposition and world building and so many words. My attention span is not there for that.
I'm gonna like complain a bit about one of the Wheel of Time books. I do not remember which one it was, but I was reading it and like it gets so there's this army and they're going into a field of battle, and as they're going there, the like guy in charge is sitting there and thinking of all the different ways that this could go down, because they're like supposed to get reinforcements coming in to fight this other army, and they're like, if the reinforcements don't get here, then we're gonna have to fight them head to head, and it's like going through a whole battle scenario, and then it's like, but if they do come, because we're trying the hammer and the anvil, and we're the anvil and they're gonna be the hammer, and then we're going to like, they're gonna hammer them down into the anvil like a I cannot tell you how many times they said the word hammer and anvil. I'm not exaggerating. But so yeah, and it's going through that. And he's like, I'm getting pumped up for this battle. I need to know, are they gonna have to go head to head, or are they gonna hammer and anvil these bitches? And then a horn blows and this has been about 30-40 pages if memory serves. And then a horn blows in the distance, right as like the enemy line had come across the horizon and they're all ready, but the horn blows and the enemy line disappears, and they're like, some sort of chosen has been born. And then the prologue ends, and then chapter 1 starts years later, them having never fought. And I'm like, what? What's the
It feels like they have filler arcs. It feels like old fantasy has like anime filler arcs, and I'm like, why? You didn't need to do that.
Which I will say, it was very well written. It gave me many feels. I was very invested. I was just also very annoyed because my investment did not pay off.
That is annoying.
So this is part of why I am not a fan of old fantasy, because it's filled with so much. And I know why. It's because like back in the day they were paid per word.
Yeah.
So like a lot of money. Let me tell you, if I was paid per word, y'all get so much exposition.
Y'all like, getting filler arcs.
Y'all getting whole ass filler arcs. You're gonna know how this barbecue basilisk is made step by step. We're gonna scale it. We're gonna
get a recipe blog.
You're getting a recipe blog in the middle of my book. But we're not paid by word anymore, so no.
For me, it's like
go to daddy.
When it comes to preference between like old and new fantasy, okay, just like as a disclaimer, I haven't actually read any like actual old fantasy, but I like classics in general. Like I like old books that just have too many words in them. So it's like if I'm reading a book that's actually old and it has too many words in them, like Count of Monte Cristo, which is like 250. No, it's like, I don't even know. It's really long. It's like literally this thick. And they have conversations that just don't need to be had, but I think it's a great book. But if I'm reading like a book that was written recently and just has like too many words, I'm like, you should know better. Like you are not paid by the word. Like you should be writing.
You're not getting paid by the word.
So like if it was actually like an old book that's written in like an old style, then I'm okay with it and I'm into it. But if it's like past like a certain date, then I'm like, this is not.
Sophie's like, my level of forgiveness is gone. So, see, for me, I'm like, I know that there's still an audience for that and there's still a demand, and that's cool. That's fine. You do you, boo boo. It is not for the Sam. The Sam is no fan. No.
So, Alexandre Dumas was paid by the word, and I think he made a fuck ton of money.
Alexander said, paid by the word, baby. I'm gonna never work again.
Right.
Yeah. This book is like hefty. Anyways.
I'm used to reading and translating ancient epics, so I don't mind unless Jay has been desensitized.
all I'm gonna say is when I'm looking for a new book to read, if it was written before like 2005, I move on.
As like
I cannot put up with it at all. My tolerance is on the floor. It's not for me.
So I feel like I too did not mind old man fantasy when I was younger, but now I just do not have the patience for that. I do not need to know and people think I exaggerate when I say this, but no, I read this in a book where they were riding on horses and they looked at a tree and they were like, and by that tree, me and this one guy who is the son of this other guy who I have known since childhood. And then here is a bit about our friendship. And this is the tree where we made some sort of agreement and everything. And its leaves are like this, and that. And like, they haven't taken one fucking step on their horses. And I am 10 pages later. And I'm like, no. I got it. You made your bank. I respect, but I am too old for old man. No, we're done.
When you're reading fantasy and it turns into the book of numbers.
Yeah, I was literally about to say.
I feel like expositions have a good purpose, but shouldn't be too long and should be well written. There is a difference between exposition and an exposition dump that is longer than the action in the chapter. And that is what we are discussing. Because exposition is important. And you do need some level of exposition, especially in fantasy. However, I do not need a 10-page history on a tree. I do not! Okay, if the tree is talking and walking, I may forgive 10 pages on how. Another reason why The Hobbit is basically a recipe blog, endless story shit, and very detailed meals. Aren't there also songs in The Hobbit?
Oh my
like
gosh,
all
yes.
the songs are written out.
Yeah, okay. I said I hadn't read any old fantasy. I have read The Hobbit, and I actually do like The Hobbit. But I feel like since it's for like a younger age category than The Lord of the Rings, it doesn't have as much juice.
Okay, so hot take on that. The reason it is considered a children's novel is because at the time that it was published, fantasy was not considered an adult genre. It was considered a genre only for children, which is why children/juvenile fantasy is one of the subgenres that I will cover, because that is one of the things that I will talk about. It is actually, by today's standards, an adult fantasy novel. However, publishing said, no self-respecting adults reads fantasy. That's just fairy tales and for children.
Yeah.
And that is why it was published as a child's book. Not because it's a child's book, but because because elitism and snubbery has existed forever.
It is also just like a lot shorter than the Lord of the Rings books, though. So it does have like less of the like exposition that you associate with Tolkien.
Yeah, I think by the time he wrote the Lord of the Rings, he had more like
World Bible going on,
respect in the community, and they were like, okay, fine, you can write for adults now.
Yeah.
When I was reading Lord of the Rings.
Okay, mommy is live streaming to your other parent. The other one. Don't just stare at me. She's like, so.
Yeah. But no, when I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I got to Tom Bombadil, and I'm just like, what is happening? Why are we here? Why are we doing this?
I tried so hard to read the Book of Numbers. I got so fucking bored. I did read the whole Bible front to back. Why? Wait, really? Yes. As long as my memory of my research from that section is accurate, then yes, this is it. Sir, you want to fight today. You're just ready to fight. The Hobbit is basically the story of Beowulf from the view of the thief rather than the king.
I don't know anything about Beowulf except about the movie.
The Beowulf movie. We need a separate Let's Talk for the Beowulf movie. God. Holy shit. What a movie. No. What a film.
You know, I've actually discussed that when my... I currently do a Sailor Moon Let's Talk series, but when Sailor Moon's done, it's just going to be like different animes or shows or movies and stuff. But I could probably, since I'm doing more writerly videos like this, we could probably sneak in a movie one too, if y'all want to do a movie one.
If you ever do a Beowulf Let's Talk, I have things to say about that movie. That movie is wild.
So if I invite CV and not you, it'll...
I honestly doubt that
Matt might disown me.
Yeah.
Matt might be like, I see how it is now. I'm kidding. Of course I will. You specifically requested with it.
Oh my gosh. I haven't actually seen Beowulf, for the record. I've just heard Matt talk about Beowulf.
Watch it. Oh my god.
Well, hold on. So when I do a Let's Talk with media, usually it's two people who have seen it and one person who hasn't. And then the one
Have you
person...
seen Beowulf?
That is the one with the 12 Norsemen and then the one Arabian guy, right?
I don't think
that's
so.
13th Warrior. No, I don't think I've seen Beowulf.
Beowulf.
There's like a snake lady.
There's a snake lady. It is grotesque.
Well, then look, you two can watch Beowulf, and I'll be the audience surrogate who don't know jack shit, and I'll just have a list of questions for you.
The most insane animation I've seen in my life.
That's a good idea.
Everything looks like a nightmare.
Right,
Love it.
Fox, make a note for me because I don't want to switch my note pages in my Let's Talk. Let's talk JoJo. We might do JoJo, but we have to do a shorter anime after Sailor Moon because Sailor Moon's going to take until next summer to finish. I want to hear this movie discussion. Well, subscribe and put your notifications on, and you'll definitely know when we do it. Grendel's mom in the poem, Some Bestial Horror. Grendel's mom in the movie, let's make Angelina Jolie
It's
naked.
ridiculous. It's like Fantasy Polar Express.
Oh no!
Like, that's the best way I can describe this movie.
According to Tolkien, The Hobbit was a story he told his sons when they were young, but then he determined that children did not need fantasy, only adults need it. Yeah, so when it was published, the reason it was published as a children's book was all fantasy at the time was published as children's juvenile fiction. I don't even think it was called. Hold on, let me double check my notes before I make an ass of myself, because I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah, it was called juvenile fantasy or just children's literature because they were like, no. Although take everything I just said with a grain of salt. Obviously, always do your own research, as I am not infallible and my resources could be full of shit and I just don't know it. But I try to do my best. So JJBA part 1 is 12 episodes. Sir, but there's like 8,000 parts.
Never watched any JoJo. I think I should though.
You want
I've had so many people encourage me.
I definitely need to watch that anime.
We can do a watch party.
Ooh, yeah. Sounds like
Sorry, I'm plugging my charger in. That's why I'm like beneath the table.
So JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is for everybody who came here for the fantasy and are now here for the anime. So JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is actually a really fascinating thing because each part is a different genre. And the first one is paranormal. Basically, there's a dragon. The guy breaks into his hoard and steals his favorite goblet. So I know the plot of Beowulf. I've just not seen the movie.
The story is insane, and the movie is also.
That's why The Lord of the Rings is darker than The Hobbit. And yeah, for some dumb reason, that movie decided to make Grendel small.
I don't get it because I read Beowulf at no point.
There's only 8 parts. Sir, Sailor Moon only has 5 seasons.
There's only 8 seasons, Sam. What is the talking point we're talking about right now?
Beowulf?
Old fantasy versus new fantasy.
Yeah. Beowulf?
Matt's love of Beowulf. All right, let's see. Small thing. We're going to Matt's talking point. Oh God, where did all of Sophie's points come from? Fox! I'm like, who has the ability to edit my Mila note? So Fox has added maps is a map lord. Maps talk about maps.
Oh yeah, I actually could talk about maps.
9 through 10. Well, we'll do maps next then. But small things that keep popping up in the genre that you hate or love. Matt, you cannot say Tolkien races again.
No, we're good there. The thing I hate is when everything, and it's when they talk about how bad everyone smells in fantasy novels, and I'm like, why are you trying to make me nauseous? It's like I think of The Witcher where they're like, oh, he smells like onions, but he's getting laid constantly anyway, and I'm like, no, he's not. He smells like onions. You are lying to me. And
That's
also,
like-
why does he smell like onions?
That's like he
It's
smells
his
like
onion
onions. He's soaking in onions. That's the
Like,
pheromone of the
I guess
times.
if all the men smell like onions.
Yeah,
then
if
you
it's
just
what
have to
you're
choose
like,
one.
if it's what you're like socialized and desensitized to,
And like,
maybe
it
he
always,
smells like spring onions, which smell better than normal
I do
onions.
love onions, but
yeah, I mean, don't get
not
me wrong, I love an
sexually.
onion, but like, I
Oh, this went to a place.
Anyways,
I love onions, but
Smell
when
onions.
and like it's always like chalked up to like realism and stuff, and I get it. Like they didn't.
No, I don't
Maybe-
get it. And you know why I don't get it, Matt? Because here's the thing. Here's the fucking thing with realism and poor hygiene. Most of the world knew about good hygiene before the modern day. The motherfucking ancient
And
Egyptians,
did oils.
they used oils, they used perfumes, they had their own soaps, they had skin and hair care, motherfuckers. Ancient Asia, as did they. Fucking Scandinavia was known for it. Scandinavian travelers, Vikings, whatever we're gonna call them for the moment, because I am too right now to remember. They were so well groomed that like rumors and shit were started about. That's where the whole like nasty Viking that with all that came from, that with lies and rumors, because the European men were afraid the pretty Vikings would steal their women's. I am not kidding. You can check that
Yes!
historical fact.
I love it.
So no, it is not realistic.
Because
It isn't.
there's like scented, like no one at any point has wanted to smell like an onion, as far as I know. And
Someone
so I'm sure someone has. That's probably true. But it's just like,
I'm sure it's
Even-
someone's out there, and we're not
even if
shaming
they
them.
smell bad, that's fine. Why do I need to hear about it? I like sometimes it's relevant, but so often it's not relevant. It's just like, oh yes, this is the main character. He works in the fields and he smells like shit all the time. He smells so bad. Let's talk about his odor. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about his odor, man.
I do apologize. Africa, North, South, and Central America, they all knew about good hygiene too. So I'm just wondering if maybe
basically
one part
everyone
of the
but, like,
world didn't take care of their hygiene as well as everybody else, and it's now the fantasy standard.
It
I'm
makes
just
me feel like
wondering if there's a correlation there. I can't confirm it, but
it makes me feel like the author has bad hygiene, and you just want to make your characters also have bad hygiene, so you don't have to take a shower. Just take your shower, write characters that sometimes smell good.
Okay, so Chris says, a man did my carpet in my parents' house. He smelled like an onion. The scent doesn't leave you a memory.
So yeah, that's the thing that keeps popping up in fantasy that I hate, is all the characters smelling like shit.
And I agree. Now, for the record, if your characters are traveling and they have no access to be able to smell well, describing them smelling bad is actually a good way to portray that the journey was rough, or that the journey sucked, or that they're not feeling their best right now. Because, you know, after a hard day of work outside and I'm smelly, I don't like it. I don't like the smell. I don't like the feel. It's not good. So when I read about characters who just traveled like 10 hours on a horse in like the hot sun, I'm like, I feel you. That sucks. I don't, but like, don't try to make this attractive to me.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, it's usually men, and it's usually like,
And I get it.
They are
It's
getting all the chicks, and also they smell like literal poop.
and they're trying to like, it's musk. It's like, no, there's the difference. There's
that's
the
not
difference between musk and BO. There is.
Yeah.
It's not the same. What is it about people not knowing what showers are? Just gotta know how to
Even
take care
if
of
your
your body.
people are in a setting where they're stinky, I think someone said this earlier. Like, you don't always need to know.
Yeah,
We,
like
Sophie and Matt, like, just let them be stinky. And
I
peace.
can infer that they smell bad if they've been writing all day.
You can be
But-
stinky and
But
silent.
when they're just like, oh, and his sour odor, like, great, now I'm nauseous. I don't want to read anymore. I want to go take a shower myself just from
I know
reading
the
this.
descriptor to fuck with Matt now. Beware.
If you
the next
describe someone
time.
as smelling sour, I want to put the book down.
Fair
Even if
enough.
it makes sense, I'm
That's
done.
fair.
I'm wondering if I've done that.
I use rank
Rank
more
is a
than
good word.
anything. Yeah.
Rank is a really good word.
Thank you. Okay, and the whole bad hygiene part. Yeah, here's the other thing. It should have. This is that whole believable versus realistic thing. Like, you cannot tell me that they bathed in weeks and I won't care. You start telling me about how bad they smell, how dirty they are, I am about to start questioning their health. Like, that is a thing. Like, hop in a river. That's right. At least rinse
Literally.
down, even if you don't have soap. Water goes a long
Rinse.
way. Me and D&D, portable bathtub. Let me spend. He does. Every time we have a D&D, he buys a portable bathtub for his traveler pack.
Aw, cute.
Smelled sour like a war.
Do not make me gag on stream, sir.
Yucky.
Smell so bad you going.
If you didn't have such a visceral reaction, I'd just change your name to the Sour Matt. But I feel like that would be too much. I have lines.
Oh,
Fantasy Sophie Lina. I just noticed. Fantasy president. Oh, now I'm the only one left out. Hold on.
Well, I changed it earlier because I thought Fantastique was.
yeah, I thought
part of the-
Fantastique was a bit, so I did Fantasy President.
Well, and we see how much I was paying attention to everybody. Okay, there we go. I'm in the club now.
There we go.
Towards the end. Matt the Sour Patch Kid. Okay. Sophie, what are things that you hate or love? Chat, what do you hate and love? We've heard
You
about
know,
that.
I was trying to think about this because I know you sent me this point earlier, and I just came up blank. Like, I know that I have opinions, but I don't know any of them.
See, I feel that. That's why I try to send the talking points to everybody ahead of
appreciate
time
it.
so we can prepare ourselves, and then I don't prepare myself. And
Yeah, I can't think of anything right now. So
give me one moment to channel my inner rage. Matt got me with the hygiene thing.
I will say one thing I love, because that's also on the table here,
Oh, yes.
is I love, like, dancing in fantasy.
Yes.
Have a grand ball or a dance, and it's fantastic, especially if it's towards the end and, like, shit's getting real, but there's this, like, royal ball that everyone has to go to. It's fantastic. I love it every single time. Put it in everything I ever read.
I have it.
Good. Everyone has to dance in anything you put in front of me.
I like the dancing outside with the fire behind them and stuff. So
Oh,
then
that's
it
nice.
it's and the romantic interest is all like, oh well, and they're just like the world fades away for them.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. That. All right. I don't know if you guys. This isn't like a movie, but I don't know if you guys have seen the 2005 Pride and Prejudice.
Thank you for dating it.
But I'm dating it because there's like a billion Pride and Prejudice adaptations. But anyone in the chat who has seen it will know that there's a scene where they're dancing and they're like at a ball and there's like a ton of people and it's like you're looking at them and there's a crowd behind them and then there's like a rotation of the camera and suddenly there's no crowd and it's just like the two of them and they're dancing in an empty room and it's just like
Literally give me a dancing scene over any battle scene ever. Dancing
Sorry,
is
that's how I feel
so
about
fun to read.
It's so good.
Also, when it's like a warrior dancing race, so like they're mixing the weapons and like their actual fighting style is like fluid and shit because dancing and fighting actually do have a lot in common and they can like strengthen each other. Yes, that's biological warfare. Smell like a wet dog.
Stop it!
Yes.
Stop! Chill.
I love when they put effort into language. Yes, effort. Like I will read the second part in a moment. But like effort into language, I really love that. I especially love when you can like source back the like language to one of our languages, and it also like has what is like the nomenclature and stuff has a significance and an importance, and you can like see the patterns and everything. I hope I used the word nomenclature correctly.
Jen
And
will correct you if you didn't.
Yes, the linguist will let me know. I hate fantasy racism for obvious reasons. Yes, agreed. Like there's so many other ways that we can have things. Conflict.
I think
That's the word I
continue.
struggle.
I think this is just like a world building thing in general, but I really love when people pay attention to the fashion
Yes.
in their fantasy. That's all.
Fashion
I
is
think it's
great.
good.
Fantasy fashion is fantastic.
Fantasy fashion is good.
Why does nobody do stretches before a fight or battle? Yes, I love when people actually warm up. I literally have the dancing outside fire scene. Yes, as do I. I have several. That's part of the morning routine to stretch. I actually plan on having my characters crash a ball in my story, but I do love when there are dancing scenes because it's so cool to watch. Yes. Matt's favorite movie is probably You Got Served, Dancing in Battle in One.
I'm not familiar with this movie,
I don't know what that
but
is.
if that's the case, I need to watch this movie.
When the generational gap presents itself. Like we all forgot we were in two different generations until this moment.
Yeah.
I'm looking it up.
So I think one of the things that I hate
Sorry.
It's fine. I think one of the things I hate in fantasy is just when you have the homogenous race where it's like everybody is the same or does the same thing, and it's just like everyone's a clone of one thing. And it's
Yes.
I know it's more prevalent in sci-fi, but it's also a thing in fantasy, and I'm like, no. There should like evolution just doesn't work that way. And yes, I know believable, not realistic, but I don't find it believable.
Yeah.
That they would just all be like even things that have a hive mind. Like I don't want to mention it, but I'm watching Hunter x Hunter, and there's the chimera ants, and they're all like supposed to have a hive mind and stuff. But each ant is different. And so they're called ants, but they're just like one's a giant furry lion man, and another one's this bird rabbit hybrid.
Anime stuff.
They're very weird, and each one is really different. But I'm like, that's an example of it's basically like kind of supposed to be this hive mind clone colony thing, but they're all still very individual and different. So I don't like it when it's just like copies of each other because somebody just doesn't want to make individual characters. I said it. Come for me.
You're right.
I know I looked like I was doing it directly to like we were looking at each other in that moment. I'm trying to see where we were. It's the big scene where character B realizes that he might be in love with A. Super
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
When that happens in a dance, yeah.
Planet of the Hats. That's yes.
What is that?
It's a trope.
I don't know what's that.
It's basically what I was describing.
Okay.
Where it's like everybody wears the same hat.
Okay.
They're all the same. So like a human lands on a planet, and like all of the males of a species wear a top hat and look the same, and all the females wear like a little bonnet and look the same. So I hate it. All right, but that is. Oh wait, we will talk about maps, and then we will end because I promised Sophie maps.
Okay. The only thing that I have to say about maps is maps are a really useful tool, not just for like showing people like a visual reference for your world, but also for including world building details that don't need to be included in the text. Like if someone wants to see more about like the trade routes and stuff, that kind of thing that really probably shouldn't be included in the text itself, they can look at, the way your societies are placed on your maps in relation to rivers and other other settlements and stuff, and kind of glean that kind of information. And if you've built out and planned all this stuff in your head that you know your readers probably don't actually want to read about, that's stuff that you can channel into your map, so that if people do want that kind of information, they can, you know, spend more time looking at your map. And if they don't, they can just glance at it and be like, oh, this is the map, you know?
I also really enjoy a map, like especially in an adventure
Mm-hmm.
one, where, you know, they're like traveling, and then like you look on the map and there's a little like dot 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 where they're traveling. I am 100% that person that will flip back to the map to see where we are. Like, I need to know, how far have we gotten on our journey?
Yeah, I agree.
And also like low-key judge if I think we could have made it there in time on the horses, but that's fine. I don't actually hold that against the author. I think it's cool when, like, so here's one of the things where I think it's really cool when an author like has that realistic and believable travel time.
Yeah.
But I'm also don't give a fuck and not gonna complain if we get like hundreds of miles in 2 days. I don't care. We got there. I didn't want to read a week of traveling, so we're fine.
Right.
Just go to the speed of light. I don't care.
I agree. I don't care enough, and I don't want to read it. So
I actually, most of like my magic races, they have some sort of magical means of traveling, just so I don't have to deal with it. Also, Matt, I'm sorry. It's Fox's fault.
Why am I upside down? Am I hanging from a tree?
Also, why does it look like you're wearing no pants?
I'm waiting for the rest
I'm not.
of it.
That's part of the fantasy photo shoot.
Oh, right. That your mom took.
Yeah, I was cosplaying as a race that doesn't wear pants.
Yeah.
So, obviously. Yeah.
Iraqi, Japan to Egypt. Yeah, that's going to take 48 episodes. It did. All right.
I just want everyone to look at the picture of me in this scenario, because I worked really hard on it.
I'm waiting for y'all to note the text in the photo.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even.
That's what I was apologizing for.
I was just looking at Sarah.
I was just so caught up with our outfits and also being upside down.
Matt and Sophie were like, damn, we look so cool. Didn't even notice Fox's trolling.
Oops, sorry.
Man.
But also, yes, they look amazing.
So do you.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm actually mostly wearing that today.
You know, I actually noticed that it was the same top.
Oh, thank you. I literally went into my closet, turned right, grabbed the white and blue part, and put it on, and I was like, this is good enough. Not sour boy. Yes, if you come to the lives, you can occasionally see Fox trolling people. He's like
pretty regularly.
He's like I said, he's just the behind the scenes person. All right. So is there anything I wanted to say about maps? All of Fox's notes are gone. Sir, where did you go?
While you're
Matt,
looking,
do you have anything about maps?
Yeah, one thing I have with maps, and I feel like this is gonna just come back to me shitting on the Aragon map again. But like,
chat, do y'all have anything to say about maps? Is our recent BS degree in what was it, geography?
I think it was environmental science.
Yes. Are you mistaken. Here? Did you have anything to say about maps?
No.
Right, go on, Matt.
So a couple things that annoy me with maps is one, when there's stuff that just like doesn't have thought, like things are just kind of thrown on there and there wasn't thought behind it. I feel like maps should be very well thought out. You should think about geography and stuff like that. And even if it's not like plot relevant, I feel like it should be map relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is I get a little annoyed when there is something on the map that, and it's like marked and like has a name, and then it never is mentioned in the story. Because then I'm just like, why is that on the map? Like, I mean, like, it's one of those where, like, say it's a map that has like 9 cities on it and they're named, and like 8 of the 9 are mentioned and visited, and it's just like, well, what about that guy over there? Come on.
It's like when you're playing a video game and it's like, this is on the map. It must be important. And then
right.
like never shows up and you're like, Did I miss something?
But I gotta go there.
I love maps. I drew one myself from a first whip. Aw, yeah. I drew a map for one of my RPs, and it was just a bunch of blobs where I'm like, this is the relative locations of your countries. Enjoy. I think maps in the beginning of a book is pretty cool, especially seeing the places.
I love a map at the beginning of a book.
When the map takes 2 pages, so you can't see it fully because it's tucked. Oh my god, I hate that because I'm always like,
yeah, I'm not about that life.
I do. I think because usually it's an issue if it's printed on like these 2 specific pages, but when they print it on like the cover and then the page right next to the cover, it's not an issue. And so I appreciate when it's like that, because then I'm like, yes, I can see everything. But then when it's on like the next page, this is how much I love the map at the beginning of the book. I can tell you. So, yeah, but yes.
I do want to say, like, if people in the chat have questions about maps or are wondering what makes a good map, I do literally make fantasy maps professionally, and I have like a series on my Instagram about making maps and like what makes a good map. I have in-depth opinions about all of these things that I will not go into here because it's
Let's
just
talk
too much. But if you want to see, it's on my Instagram at Sophie Lina B. It should be linked in the description. You'll have to dig through some other posts that you hopefully will also like. But yeah, there's map info on my Instagram.
Fox is requesting a Let's Talk Maps.
Ooh, that should be interesting.
When you have a map, though, that printed onto the flap and you can fold it out to see what... Yes. Also, one thing that I really love, and normally you have to pay more because it'll be a special edition thing, but is when it comes with, like, the leather printed map.
Ooh.
With the book. Like, they do it a lot for the Legend of Zelda games when you, like, pre-order the special edition one. And they will get... I think my favorite quality one is one of the most recent. It might be... It's either Wind Waker or Skyward Swords. And it's because it's on, like, this leathery plastic. So, like, it feels kind of like leather and paper, but it's actually, like, plastic. So it's water and, like, wear resistant. I fucking love those so much.
Maps.
But you fuck up.
Oh, yeah. The other day,
no! Why would you put that into the universe?
Just hello? I'm sorry.
Oh, see ya. Good night. Have a good night.
And we're out.
Sleep well.
Wait. Okay.
And she's back.
Welcome back. Did you sleep well? Was that a good nap?
It was.
Good. Are you rested?
I'm really well rested, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yep. What were we talking about?
Maps.
Maps.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what you were going to say, but
I was gonna say Sam was saying how much she loves maps. Just a note on how much I love maps. The other day I went to like this old like bookstore and they had like an upstairs room that was just like full of old topographical maps. And when I say that my friends had to drag me out of that room, I'm serious. Like I probably could have just stayed up there for like 5 hours. And those aren't even fantasy maps. Those are just like maps of like Utah.
Yeah, but like topographical maps are so cool.
They're so cool.
Sophie's like, Sam thinks she loves maps. Let me tell you. No, I'm just messing with you. You probably do like them a lot more than I do.
I don't know.
Doesn't
You sound pretty passionate.
I love that all three of us love maps.
I know, right?
Like
I just love.
That's what the place looks like.
The like.
That's what the place looks like.
I just love the like drastic way we do and don't fit into the fantasy stereotype box because we're all like fuck it, like super big exposition and world building, but those maps though.
What a fucking map. Holy shit.
Let me tell you.
A landscape scaled down? Are you kidding me?
Are you anti-map, sir? Is this something that I never
Sorry.
Chris is bought out by Big Globe.
Actually cool looking map.
What is he saying? Because I can only.
And he look at it.
Hold on.
It all wrong and shit, and it's ended, and I'm trying to see. And they put that town right there too. They put that town. You can't see that shit because they printed it all fucked up. They fucked it up with the printing.
Sorry, you have been so hurt by the misprintings of
They
these
put
maps.
the town and they're like, you see the fucking trail and you can't see it because it's printed all fucked up.
That's why we were discussing alternative ways that they can showcase the maps in all their glory safely.
Well, here's the thing: you just do a
On one
portrait mode
goddamn
map, and then it
page,
just
that's how you
covers one
fucking
page.
do it.
Sorry, Sophie, I can't hear you over the rage.
Over the wrath.
I didn't realize he felt so strongly about, or that he had been burned so deeply by poorly printed maps in the past. I thank you.
The thing that I said is the solution is just doing like vertical orientation maps, and then it only covers one page anyways, and it doesn't have to have the like split in the middle.
Oh yes. Fox is like, Sophie has the best name now. I'm so pleased.
I didn't even notice. Thank you. My title.
I enjoy changing my guest names and then waiting to see how long it takes them to see it.
Okay, am I able to change my name right now?
Yeah.
No.
If so, how?
Sophie said no. You go to
No.
the like ...
Aha.
There you go.
Wait, no,
Don't
that's
tell
Avatar.
him.
Hold on. No, this is gonna be really good. This is gonna be really
Okay.
good.
Okay. All right, we
There we go.
should
We
be
got it.
wrapping up.
Okay, that is good. I'll be honest.
Nap yeah.
Now this is your geographer name to go
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
You're right.
Nap. Just so everyone knows, mine's musical. It's maps. Plotting the trails in real time. Maps. These are the maps that lead our path. Maps we need. All right. So we should start with the. I'm not changing the trader's name to Sour Boy.
Is that Fox or Chris requesting that?
It's fun. Who would call you traitor?
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay. So we need to start doing the wrap up now because some map. Excuse me. Hold on. I'm sorry. We're gonna wrap up in 20 minutes when we're done messing
The
with
map,
our
the
names.
L maps it.
Oh wait. Got to change one letter. There's this, my new name.
Love it. All of the map.
All of the maps.
Okay, so thank you for everybody who came and who joined us and who talked. Thank you to those who just, lurked and enjoyed the banter, everything. And even thank you to anybody who's hate watching, if there are any, because that's still view times for me. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let my guests do their outros, and then I'll close down the stream.
So I am Matt Hollon, map enthusiast. I'm a fantasy writer working on my debut fantasy novel. I've also got a fantasy short that will be somewhere for you all to see at some point in the not so distant future. I also have some social medias. Check them out. They're down there. Keep up to date with all things me. And yeah.
I love how slowly but surely all of my regular co-hosts just absorb bits and pieces of my.
I'm Sophie Lina B. I am a writer and an illustrator. Since it seems relevant right now, I'm also a fantasy cartographer. If you need a map for your book, contact me. My portfolio should be in the description. I am currently working on my debut novel, which is a young adult fantasy romance called The Rebel Bard. I post about it on Instagram. I also post my maps and other artwork on Instagram if you want to follow me. I also have a short story that should be somewhere to read at some point in the near future, but you gotta follow me on Instagram for more info about that because I don't know yet. Yeah, all that info is down in the description. Check it out if you want to.
I have a reason I'm doing a thing. Hold on.
Okay.
Right here. This is where you go to get your maps.
Ooh.
Get your map
That's
on.
me.
This looks like a map. I'm trying to find the maps.
That is a map, but it's a slightly
Yeah.
different map.
Well, still.
This is
This
a
is
map
the
I did for like a contemporary contemporary mystery. So it's not my usual like fantasy style, but it's still a map.
Yes, it's still a map. This is still like the cool things that they do. I say they. I mean Sophie. Sophie, where are your other maps?
Keep scrolling. There's some of the
There's
stuff
one.
about map.
So yes,
yeah.
this is some of like the information that Sophie posts about for maps and stuff. If you want, it's educational. It's awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Her Instagram is linked down below. And I am writing mom Samantha L. Nasset, also known as Maps, Samantha Map It, here at my channel, Writing Mom Samantha L. Nasset, where I talk about writer things, parent things, and writer parent things. I also host live streams like this on Mondays, where sometimes we do productivity streams, and sometimes we do topical Let's Talks. Next week, we're actually having a party because it's mine and Matt's birthday, though he won't be there because he has family and friends who want to spend his birthday with him. Weird, but okay.
Really inconvenient, I know.
But that's okay. Instead, we did a Let's Talk for Fantasy this week.
Happy birthday to us.
And when I post videos, I post them on Thursdays. My next video, come hell or high water, will be a video breaking down the genre umbrella of fantasy and all of the fantasy subgenres that I can get my little hands on. If you would like to keep up to date with all things Sam, you can sign up to my newsletter at my website down below, SamanthaLNasset.com. Also, you can go to my website and read my flash fiction, Till Pizza Do Us Part, so that you can see that I can, in fact, write, and I do know what I'm talking about when I discuss atmosphere and tone and all these other things. If you would like to help support the channel and help me pay off my van, you can donate to my Ko-fi down below.
Give Sam money.
Yeah. I think, is that everything? Oh, I'm also hosting a writing event called I'm co-hosting it with Jessica Williamson, the Worldwide Writeathon. We are currently accepting host applications until Friday, and then we will pick host. You can find that linked down below as well, where there's a link to the channel with the video with all the information, or the server where you can ask questions. And I think that is possibly everything. If you liked this, you like what we do here, you can subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.